Chapter 1890. Boom. An earth-shattering collision sound rang out. Lin Sun stood still, but the gray-robed elder was shaken by the impact before he managed to stabilize himself. Everyone was shocked and their pupils dilated. Even peerless figures like Qi Lingzi and Shui Biun revealed expressions of shock. They were confident that they could suppress Zhang Beirong in a battle of the same realm, but the gap between them and a king of sages would be huge. However, a peak great saint was actually able to clash head-on with a king saint. This was simply too shocking. Who was he? Why had they never heard of such a person in the Dew world? Old man, don't blame me for being ruthless if you don't know what's good for you. Lin Sun's voice was cold. He had helped Yu Yunhe this time because Yu Qingyang had done him a great favor. With him around, he could not tolerate Yu Yunhe being bullied. The gray-robed elder's expression changed several times. Finally, he took a deep breath and said, "Let go of Zhang Beirong and this matter will be over. Apologize first, then let him go." Lin Sun said resolutely. The gray-robed elder was furious. His sleeves fluttered, and a surge of ferocious power surged, causing many cultivators nearby to hold their breaths. This was the power of a king of sages. If you want to see him die, continue. Lin Sun flicked his fingers, not caring at all. The tsunami-like pressure rushed towards Lin Sun, but it was like a breeze blowing on a hill. Not even the corner of his clothes fluttered. Zhang Beirong, who was suppressed on the ground, was so uncomfortable that he was seeing stars. He felt like he was on the verge of collapse. Many cultivators nearby could not remain calm. In the Diyu world, who would dare to go against an expert from the Danding Taoist sect and even threaten him? Only Yu Yunhe was puzzled. Didn't Elder Ma Taijin say that he was suppressed by Lin Sun after returning to the sect? Otherwise, the gray-robed elder would not have the guts to go against Lin Sun. He must be tired of living. "I apologize." At this moment, Zhang Beirong spoke first. The feeling of impending death made him so agitated that he did not care about his face anymore. The gray-robed elder let out a long sigh. The experts from the Pill Cauldron Dao sect all revealed looks of shame and indignation. Zhang Beirong's lowering of her head made them feel ashamed. There is nothing better than being able to correct one's mistake. I hope you can remember this lesson. If you provoke me again, you won't be so lucky anymore. Lin Sun raised his palm, and Zhang Beirong felt as if he had been struck by a great calamity. His entire body felt as if it had been lifted by 1,000 mountains. He was helped up by the other successors of the Pill Cauldron Dao sect. He did not dare to stay any longer, nor did he have the face to remain here. "Young man, we will remember this lesson." The gray-robed old man snorted coldly as a ruthless look flashed in his eyes. Lin Sun smiled and didn't care at all. If it were him, he would have killed the gray-robed elder with such an attitude. After all, he was not a cultivator from the Great Yu world. He could just leave after killing him. However, things were different now. He had Yu Yunhe by his side. The latter was the successor of the Pill Cauldron Dao sect. If he killed Zhang Beirong and the gray-robed elder, he would definitely implicate Yu Yunhe. Watching Zhang Beirong, Mu Xiuqi, and the others leave with their tails between their legs, Yu Yunhe was also incomparably carefree in his heart. When the other cultivators present looked at Lin Sun's group again, the way they looked at him had become different from before. Especially when they looked at Lin Sun, many people already had a look of fear on their faces. Of course, for peerless figures like Qi Lingzi and Shui Biun, Lin Sun's existence was not a threat to them. Firstly, it was because they were confident that their battle strength was practically invincible amongst their peers. Secondly, it was because they were escorted by Saint King realm experts. On the other hand, Lin Sun's group only had 4 people, and all of them were peerless great sages. Such a combination was not a threat to them. Whoosh! Before long, the cold torrent covering the 9 states river began to recede, and a secret realm portal appeared above the river. "Let's go! Let's go!" Immediately, many cultivators rushed over. In addition to those peerless figures, many ordinary cultivators also followed. Although they dared not expect to obtain any great fortune, it would be a great harvest if they could pick up some treasures, elixirs, and cultivation methods. Brother Lin, shall we also start moving? Yu Yunhe looked at Lin Sun. Let's go. Lin Sun nodded, and the group rushed in. Ancient mountains rose and fell continuously in the Diu's secret realm. The sky was filled with chaotic qi, presenting a primitive and desolate atmosphere. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Countless brilliant escape lights flew between heaven and earth. Some rode immortal birds, some stepped on flying swords, and some rode treasure ships. It was a spectacular sight to behold. Lin Sun, Yu Yunhe, and the others flew among them, looking inconspicuous. Brother Lin, the place of opportunity left by the ancestor of Yu clan is located in the Nine Pinnacles mountain range. At our speed, we can reach there in less than half a day. On the way, Yu Yunhe introduced quickly, however, that place is not accessible to ordinary people. It is covered with extremely terrifying restrictive power. Generally speaking, if you want to seek the opportunity in the Nine Pinnacles mountain range, you must have the help of a Taoist master. Otherwise, it is extremely easy to be trapped and die. As they talked, they flew forward quickly. The Diu's secret realm was huge, like a world of its own. However, Lin Sun and the others still met many cultivators along the way. From time to time, they could see long rainbows flashing across the sky. Kill! Along the way there were fights and killings. Some of them were fighting for the peerless treasures that grew in the secret realm, while others were fighting for the treasures that were scattered between the mountains and rivers. Of course, there were also many cases of people killing and robbing others of their treasures. Killing and arson earned money, repairing bridges and roads left no corpses. Rather than painstakingly searching for the opportunity, it was better to kill and rob. This method was undoubtedly the simplest and most brutal, and the benefits were the most obvious. Along the way, Lin Sun and the others did not meet any ignorant people. Moreover, their goal was very clear. They completely ignored the other opportunities along the way and headed straight for the Nine Pinnacles mountain range. Later on, there were fewer and fewer cultivators along the way. However, the cultivators who dared to venture deep were at least descendants of famous sections. Half a day later, Lin Sun and the others finally arrived at the Nine Pinnacles mountain range. Looking from afar, the 9 sacred mountains rose from the ground and sat in the 9 palaces. They were like 9 huge cauldrons, giving off a shocking visual impact. At this moment, a group of cultivators had already gathered in front of the 9 Pinnacles mountain range. The 9 sacred mountains have 9 paths to the core of the hinterland of the mountain range. However, each path is covered with a terrifying restrictive formation. Yu Yunhe pointed into the distance. Brother Lin, please look. This is the layout of the 9 pinnacles suppressing the world. Our ancestor, Emperor Yu, once collected the origin law of chaos of the 9 worlds and forged the 9 pinnacles imperial weapons here. Thus, this place became known to the world as a place of fortune. Anyone who can enter it has the opportunity to break through the realm and become a king of sages. Moreover, the origin law of chaos that is distributed here is also immeasurable for condensing and refining the Tao realm. Lin Sun nodded and said, "Then let's start." He spread his divine sense and noticed that many top figures from the 9 great worlds had already taken action. They flew into the 9 Pinnacles mountain, which was covered with terrifying restrictions, from different directions. Among them, there were Qi Lingzi, Shui Biun, Li Yu, Lai Dongzhan, Xiao Budu and other extremely dazzling figures. Similarly, Lin Sun also noticed that Zhang Beirong, Mu Xiuqi and the others from the Danding Dao sect had also entered. However, breaking the array was not an easy task. Not everyone could enter the core area of the 9 Pinnacles mountain. "Brother Lin, where do we enter from?" Yu Yunhe could not help but ask. He knew very well that Lin Sun was also a Dao Tattoo Grandmaster and was even more powerful than Master Mo. I'll have to trouble you first. As Lin Sun spoke, he waved his sleeve and moved the three of them into the Tower of Endless Way. Swoosh! He did not hesitate and did not choose any direction at all. He rushed straight towards the 9 Pinnacles mountain in the distance. Whoosh! As soon as he entered, Lin Sun felt that time and space were reversed. The entire 9 Pinnacles mountain seemed to have turned into a white world. The river water that blotted out the heavens and covered the earth surged over in a frenzy. Shockingly, the river water was actually formed from the terrifying power of the restriction. It was not simple indeed. Only then did Lin Sun understand why the restrictive formation of the 9 Pinnacles mountain was so terrifying. The terrifying river current was enough to kill a Saint Realm cultivator. Even a great saint was destined to die if he barged in rashly. Lin Sun's divine sense spread across the world. He could clearly feel that there were many invisible Dao tattoo restrictive formations operating in this world. They were extremely powerful and full of killing intent. Powerful auras were moving forward with difficulty in different regions of this world. Obviously, these were peerless figures like Lin Sun who had entered this world from different regions. They moved cautiously and cautiously. They were protected by king sages and led by Dao tattoo grandmasters as they headed towards the core of this world. Lin Sun did not intend to conceal himself and did not hold back anymore. His huge divine sense spread out and instantly understood the mystery of the Dao tattoo restrictive formations. Then, he shot up into the sky and turned into a dazzling rainbow as he headed towards the core of this world formed by the power of the restrictive formation. He had already felt a mysterious aura of the origin of chaos. It was right there. Rumble in the world, the restrictive formations that could make a Dao tattoo grandmaster act as if they were facing a formidable enemy seemed to be non-existent in front of Lin Sun. As he flew forward, the power of the restrictive formations produced thunderous fluctuations that lasted for a long time. Looking from afar, he seemed like a rainbow as he moved forward freely in the densely intertwined restrictive rules. At this moment, many experts who had entered this restrictive world were alarmed as they noticed the dazzling figure that pierced through the sky. Who is that? How dare he barge in like this? Is he tired of living? Chapter 1891. All the strongmen who entered the 9 Cauldrons restriction world were cautious and careful at every step, for fear of violating the restriction formation and causing a disaster. But that man was so arrogant that he ignored the restriction formation and broke in directly, which made many people exasperated. Something's wrong. When they saw that Lin Sun didn't encounter any obstacle and passed through the Taoist restriction formation with irresistible force, many people began to change their expressions. Damn it, which bastard is this? Does he want to die? Qiliang's face was gloomy and his heart was burning with anxiety. Hurry up, break the restriction formation with all your strength. Even if some treasures are damaged, we must rush in as soon as possible. He began to urge the Taoist masters around him, and at the same time, he began to break the restriction formation with force together with the Saint King who accompanied him. It was well known that the big opportunity in the hinterland of the 9 Cauldrons mountain was located in the core of the world covered by the restriction formation. How could Qiliang tolerate being robbed by others? Change the plan and move forward with all your strength. Hurry up. Take out all the flying spiritual insects and use them to break the restriction formation. At the same time, in different areas of the world covered by the restriction formation, Shui Biun, Li Yu, Lai Dongzhan, Xiao Budu and other peerless figures all realized the seriousness of the situation and began to move with all their strength. Some summoned densely packed puppet beasts of all shapes and sizes, risking the large number of puppets to break through the formation with all their might. Some took out magical plants, which instantly produced countless branches and vines, like countless hands, and rushed to different areas of the restriction formation. Some took out the spiritual insects they raised. Some drove some remnant souls to open the way. All kinds of means were used. Obviously, these top figures from the 9 great worlds had come prepared, and they'd made sufficient preparations for this operation. No one could easily give up this opportunity, or in other words, they were determined to win this action. Hurry up, we must hurry up. In the vast restriction formation world, an invisible contest broke out completely. At the core of this world, that was enveloped by the power of restrictions, stood a lofty divine hall. It was 300 meters tall, and it was completely made from chaotic bronze. It was brilliant and imposing. In front of the temple, a tall figure stood with his hands behind his back, his black hair fluttering in the wind. He raised his head slightly and stared at the ancient bronze temple. Lin Sun was the first to arrive. The door of the shrine was tightly shut. Birds, beasts, insects, fish, the sun, the moon, and the stars were engraved on it. A raging river descended from the sky and swept through the mountains, rivers, and all living things. An imposing figure with his back towards all living beings stood above the river. He forged 9 cauldrons and suppressed the 9 directions of this world. Could this be the ancestor of the Yu clan, Emperor Yu? Lin Sun once heard from Yu Qingyang that the history of Yu clan could be traced back to the early ancient times, which was after the end of the primitive times. Therefore, the Yu clan was truly an ancient emperor clan. This Emperor Yu was naturally a supreme figure who had attained the Tao in the early ancient times. He had once gathered the power of the chaos source law of the 9 great worlds and forged the 9 cauldrons of monarch weapons in this secret realm located in the 9 prefectures river. Now, such a picture appeared on the gate of the bronze shrine, which naturally made Lin Sun's imagination run wild. Not long after, Lin Sun waved his sleeves. Yu Yunhe, Yu Yunfeng, and Yu Yunlong appeared. When they saw the ancient bronze divine hall, disbelief filled their faces. Emperor Yu's divine palace. This was the place of opportunity left by their ancestor. However, how long had it been? How could Lin Sun arrive so soon? Lin Sun said, "I've sensed it with my divine sense. The mystery contained in the gate of the divine hall is related to some of the past history of your Yu clan. You might as well comprehend it." Brother Lin's guess is right. In the eyes of outsiders, the opportunity in Emperor Yu's divine palace is of utmost importance. But for us descendants of the Yu clan, whether we can comprehend the secret of Emperor Yu's 9 cauldrons water harnessing diagram left by our ancestor through this gate is the most important thing. Yu Yunhe had inadvertently revealed a secret. This made Yu Yunfeng and Yu Yunlong nervous. They were afraid that Lin Sun would also be tempted, which would be troublesome. Lin Sun glanced at the 2 of them and said, "If I want to rob it, can you stop me?" The 2 of them were embarrassed for a while. "Hurry up and comprehend it. Don't waste time." Lin Sun didn't say anything more. He turned his back to Emperor Yu's divine palace and looked at the world in the distance that was covered by the power of prohibition. Yu Yunhe and the other 2 also knew that time was pressing. They all operated the inheritance of their clan and meditated. Not long after, there was a ripple in the formation and a group of figures rushed out. The leader was Shui Biun and her group from the Xianshui world. When she saw Lin Sun, Yu Yunhe, and the others standing nearby, Shui Biun frowned and said in surprise, "The figure that turned into a divine rainbow and charged forward was you?" She had a deep impression of Lin Sun. Outside the Jiuzhou River, Lin Sun had once suppressed Zhang Beirong and fought a king sage without being at a disadvantage. She was very moved by this. However, Shui Biun didn't expect that the figure that charged through the void and flew through the formation with irresistible force was actually Lin Sun. This was completely out of her expectations. Lin Sun looked at them quietly. 2 king sages, a Tao pattern grandmaster, and 4 great sages, including Shui Biun. According to Lin Sun's shallow understanding of the Diyu world, this team could be said to be strong and could dominate a region. Shui Biun said indifferently, "Everyone, regardless of whether you came first or not, if you don't want to cause any trouble, you better step aside obediently." There was a faint threat in her words. Yu Yunhe and the other two were nervous. They didn't expect their competitors to arrive so quickly. They all looked at Lin Sun. Lin Sun said without looking back, "With me here, you don't need to care about anything else. Just focus on comprehending." "Are you going to refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit?" Shui Biyun's clear eyes turned cold. As an invincible figure in the Xianshui world, even the ancestors of the ancient tribes had to show some respect when she traveled in the world. Lin Sun's attitude at the moment made her very uncomfortable. Didn't this guy see that it was impossible for him to stop them by himself? "Miss, time is running out. It's time to act," a silver-haired old woman beside Shui Biyun said with a sharp voice. Her eyes revealed undisguised killing intent. But at this moment, there was another violent sound from the formation in the distance. Then, a group of people rushed over. The figure in the lead was a slender figure surrounded by bright flames. A pair of wings flickered and emitted misty flame Taoist patterns. Qi Lingzi. The group led by him also came. It seemed that they were more or less embarrassed. Obviously, they had suffered a lot when breaking the formation. But even so, it didn't damage their momentum. "You're lucky." Shui Biyun glanced at Lin Sun coldly. Her killing intent had quietly changed to target Qi Lingzi and his companions. Compared with Lin Sun, Qi Lingzi and his companions were the enemies she valued. Although they came from different worlds, Shui Biyun had heard that Qi Lingzi was born with great strength and superior aptitude. He was regarded as the first person in the Great Saint realm in the Fire World. Swish! A sword shadow appeared behind Shui Biyun. The sword edge was shimmering and obscure, and it pointed to Qi Lingzi who had just arrived. "Humph! I don't want to fight with you in the outside world, but it doesn't mean I'm afraid of you." Qi Lingzi's pupils shrank. He also noticed Lin Sun and his companions, but he ignored them directly. Obviously, he thought the same as Shui Biyun. He didn't think Lin Sun and his companions were a threat. Boom! As soon as he raised his hand, a flame spear appeared. The flames were steaming, and the breath of destruction was amazing. At the same time, the experts around Qi Lingzi and Shui Biyun were ready to fight, and they didn't hide their fighting intent. Swords were drawn. Lin Sun, Yu Yunhe and the others behind him, on the contrary, were ignored, but this battle didn't break out, because there were waves of violent fluctuations in the forbidden formation in the distance. A tall young man with bulging muscles exuded a terrible power of blood and qi. He was Li Yu, the peerless swordsman of the Rui Jin world. In an instant, Qi Lingzi and Shui Biyun both narrowed their eyes and resisted the urge to fight. The current situation was no longer a confrontation between two armies, but a tripartite confrontation. But soon the situation changed again. Lai Dongzhan of the Green Nightmare world, Xiao Budu of the White Wave world. One by one, the unparalleled figures from different great worlds dashed over with their retainers. For a moment, many elites gathered in front of Emperor Yu's celestial palace. They stood side by side and the situation was changing rapidly. "It seems that we can't decide the winner at this moment." Qi Lingzi took a deep breath and put away the divine flame spear. Shui Biyun snorted coldly, and the cold sword shadow behind her disappeared. "That person just now was you?" Li Yu's eyes were like lightning as he looked at Lin Sun in the distance. The others nearby also looked over with unfriendly expressions. Previously, they entered the world covered in forbidden formations from different paths. The fight between them wasn't very fierce, and everything was very orderly. But Lin Sun's appearance was like throwing a boulder into a pool of stagnant water, and it completely disrupted all their plans. Moreover, in order to get here at full speed, they had more or less suffered losses along the way. Some experts' treasures were destroyed and some were injured. What's more, there were even casualties around some experts. This made them extremely angry and unhappy. If no one had interfered, how could they have suffered losses? For a time, the atmosphere was oppressive, and all the heroes present vaguely pointed at Lin Sun. At this moment, Lin Sun still stood there quietly, as if he didn't care. His expression didn't change at all. But everyone could see that he was standing there to protect you, Yunhe and the others. Why aren't you talking? Weren't you very impressive when you barged through the layers of forbidden formations just now? Li Yu's voice was cold. Chapter 1892. Everyone was surprised that Li Yu was ignored again. A peerless great sage leading 3 other peerless great sages was undoubtedly the weakest group of people in front of Emperor Yu's divine palace. The crux of the matter was that Lin Sun and the others did not have a king of sages by their side. However, Lin Sun alone showed the posture of one man guarding the pass, and seemed to be so fearless. How could the people present not be surprised? Was he courting death? Or was he risking his life to snatch the opportunity? This fellow is destined to suffer a calamity. In the distance, Zhang Beirong, Mu Xiuqi, and the others from Danding Dao sect had come out. They looked at Lin Sun, who was standing in front of the crowd, with deep hatred. Sure enough, something happened in the next moment. How dare you ignore my young master's question? I'll send you on your way. Beside Li Yu, a golden-robed elder snorted coldly. His hands were like claws, pulling out rays of sharp golden finger power. With bursts of Dao sounds, he grabbed at Lin Sun. Realm of Tao, golden essence finger. The old man next to Li Yu was a saint king. As soon as he attacked, he displayed a terrifying and oppressive aura. Bang! The grasping force composed of countless golden fingers was smashed by Lin Sun's sleeve before it could get close to Lin Sun. Everyone's eyes narrowed. Many of the peerless figures present were the top figures in their respective world. They were experienced and could instantly tell that Lin Sun was not afraid of the power of the realm of Tao. How was this possible? They could not believe it. To their knowledge, only the peerless genius who was ranked top 5 on the Starry Sky Great Sage list could fight a king of sages across realms on the Starry Sky Ancient Path. However, they had never heard of such a peerless genius from Dew World. This was too unusual. However, they were only surprised and not afraid. As the top figures in their respective worlds, how could they be afraid? Don't embarrass yourself with the power of the realm of Tao before you set foot on the peak. At this moment, Lin Sun finally spoke in an indifferent voice. However, when it entered into the ears of the golden-robed old man, it was like the most vicious ridicule, and it caused his face to flush red and his hair to flutter with rage. Not only that, but the other saint kings present were also displeased. They had also never set foot on the absolute peak. Lin Sun's words were equivalent to looking down on all of them. For a moment, they looked at Lin Sun with killing intent in their eyes. If it were someone else, he would have been frightened by such a siege. But Lin Sun didn't change his expression at all. Instead, he said lightly, "Don't blame me for not warning you. You'd better disappear right now or stay there obediently. Otherwise, you'll be responsible for your own life and death." His tone was casual, as if he was eating and drinking. Everyone was stunned at first, and then they revealed expressions of disbelief. After that, they couldn't help but roar with laughter. This guy actually dared to threaten all of them? Who do you think you are? You haven't even stepped into the Saint King realm, yet your tone is even more arrogant than a Saint King. Didn't your parents tell you that a loose tongue can cause trouble? Someone berated. You overestimate yourself. The others sneered. There were more than 10 groups of forces gathered in front of Emperor Yu's divine palace. There were dozens of Saint Kings and a group of peerless figures. Even if a Saint King were here, they would probably be frightened out of their wits and flee in panic. However, Lin Sun remained very calm. In fact, he didn't even want to say anything more. Why are you talking nonsense with him? Just kill him. Someone shouted. Humph! Lin Sun directly attacked. In his eyes, these people were not a threat. They were just like a motley crew, who would see a dragon in the sky reasoning with an ant on the ground. Just kill him. A dazzling green palm print condensed and fiercely slapped down through the air. The man who shouted just now was about to dodge, but his whole body was smashed by the palm print. His flesh and blood splattered everywhere. He had killed a peak great saint with a single palm strike. "You're courting death." Liu was furious. The one who died was an expert beside him. But no one expected that Lin Sun would dare to take the initiative to attack in front of everyone. "Kill!" The golden-robed elder by Liu's side was even more direct. He waved his hands and struck out with a dazzling golden finger force. The finger force manifested the image of a domain, and the laws interweaved. It was as if a god had extended his finger. Previously, when he failed to hit Lin Sun, he was already embarrassed. Now that Lin Sun killed someone under his nose, he was completely furious and used his true power. Boom! Lin Sun put one hand behind his back and pressed out with the other. Taowu seal. The lifelike Taowu roared and rushed out from the image of a huge abyss. It turned into a huge seal that covered the sky. It had the overbearing power to crush mountains and rivers and suppress all living beings. The golden-robed elder's finger force was instantly suppressed by the huge seal. In the deafening roar, the seal exploded inch by inch. Countless rays of light turned into a rain of light. The terrifying power pressed on the golden-robed elder, causing him to stagger back and almost fall into the Tao pattern forbidden formation in the distance. The golden-robed elder was shocked. He was a saint king, but when he faced Lin Sun's seal, he felt as if he was being suppressed by an ancient divine mountain. The terrible power that could collapse the sky and the earth made his blood and qi churn. He was so uncomfortable that he almost coughed up blood. "Die!" But before the golden-robed elder could react, Lin Sun took a step forward. Behind the golden-robed elder, a force of prohibition suddenly surged. The rolling Tao pattern forbidden formation turned into a monstrous torrent, covering the golden-robed elder's figure. Boom! In an instant, the golden-robed elder, a saint king, was killed and his body turned into ashes. This time, Lin Sun killed the saint king with one strike. This world-shocking scene caused the expressions of everyone in the surroundings to change, and they were astounded in their hearts. Only now did they realize that something was off. "Let's do it together," Liu roared, his eyes almost popping out of his sockets. A divine sword made of primordial gung metal emerged from behind him and slashed at Lin Sun. Then, over 10 peerlessly terrifying auras charged out from different directions, and they were simply like numerous erupting volcanoes. Their surging might filled the heavens and the earth, and it pressed down upon everyone to the point of almost being suffocated. Rise! Qi Lingzi was surrounded by raging flames, like the ruler of divine fire. A flaming spear appeared in his hand. Condense! Shui Biun stepped on the rolling water and Taoist light, her clothes fluttering. At the same time, Lai Dongzhan stepped on the air, his blood and qi surging. Xiao Budu turned into a demonic barbarian god more than 30 meters tall in an instant. A siege was launched, and all the attacks were directed at Lin Sun. Killing a great saint with one strike was shocking, but not terrifying. But when Lin Sun showed the means to kill a saint king with one strike, everyone realized that something was wrong and chose to take action. Boom! The divine palace of Emperor Yu began to shake. Countless Tao pattern forbidden formations appeared, protecting the ancient palace from the impact. Kill! Qi Lingzi, who had a pair of flaming wings on his back, was a little faster than a saint king. He was the first to attack Lin Sun. His whole body was red, and the sound of Tao surged. The flaming spear in his hand pierced through the void at an incredible speed, stabbing at Lin Sun. Everyone could only see a bright glow of fire. This guy has hidden his strength well. He has actually entered the Saint King realm in one step. Shui Biun was shocked. With this strike alone, Shui Biun realized how terrifying Qi Lingzi was. His strength could almost compete with a Saint King realm. Clang! Suddenly, there was a sound of collision. A ray of sword qi swept out from Lin Sun's body and easily blocked the tip of the flaming spear. The flaming spear, which could be called a divine weapon, let out a mournful cry and flew out of Lin Sun's hand. Bang! Then, as if struck by lightning, Qi Lingzi's figure was sent flying. He staggered back in the air, blood spurting from his mouth and nose. Lin Sun's sword directly injured Qi Lingzi. "Let me!" Li Yu shouted. The golden divine sword swept through the air, sprinkling brilliant sword qi. With one strike, the sword qi exploded like a scorching sun, fierce and overbearing. This time, Lin Sun didn't even bother to make a move. He just gently spat out a Dao sound from his lip. "Get lost!" A syllable with a sense of humiliation turned into golden ripples, and the strange phenomenon of Puseo roaring to the sky appeared in the ripples. The void cracked at this moment. In the eyes of the crowd, they could only see the golden ripples passing by. Li Yu's sword was torn apart like a piece of paper. When it touched Li Yu's figure, the latter's divine soul was almost shattered, and his mind suffered a terrible shock. At this moment, the word, "get lost," was like the roar of an ancient demon, shaking Li Yu's qi, bones, and flesh. In the end, he was bathed in blood and fell out like a tattered sack. One word, "get lost." Li Yu, a peerless figure who could be said to be invincible in the same realm in a big world, was almost killed on the spot. The whole place was silent and all the attacks stopped. Many people gasped, and their bodies and minds trembled. How could he be human? He was simply a heaven-defying freak that could not be measured by common sense. This, Zhang Bairong's eyeballs almost fell out. When he saw Lin Sun being surrounded, he was gloating and excited, thinking that Lin Sun would be killed by the crowd. In the end, none of the expected scenes appeared. Instead, they were all destroyed by Lin Sun's "get lost." Mu Xiuqi's delicate body trembled. What kind of existence had they offended? Boom! At this moment, Lin Sun moved and took the initiative to attack. His figure shifted, and like a wisp of smoke, he appeared in front of the nearest king of saints. Whoosh! A rain-like Taishan sword qi swept out from his tall figure, condensing into a dense sword formation, and shrouding the king of saints. Break! The king of saints let out a roar, and a white Tao realm appeared behind him. Within the Tao realm, snow and ice fluttered, and the cold wind was biting. Endless frost howled, and all of this was formed by the power of the law. The killing intent was everywhere, and it was enough to make most great saints powerless to resist. Unfortunately, he had encountered Lin Sun, who had always been different from the world. Boom! Chapter 1893. Blood rained down. Another king sage was killed. The most horrifying thing was that he didn't even have the time to scream. After killing this person, Lin Sun didn't stop at all and continued to push forward. Boom! His body was like a furnace in a chaotic world as he performed his own technique. Every move he made carried a monstrous divine power that swept across the battlefield. The void was in chaos and rumbled like thunder. In just a moment, more than 10 great sages were killed and 4 to 5 kings of sages were mercilessly killed. As for Lin Sun, his body shone brightly as he walked through the battlefield. He was like a god from the depths of the abyss, reaping lives easily. This was too terrifying. In his hands, the great sage was as weak as grass. The kings of sages were slightly better, but they were either dead or injured. For a moment, the battlefield was filled with a bloody storm. It was chaotic and turbulent. Countless angry and mournful screams resounded. It should be known that these were all top figures from the 9 great world. Moreover, they were accompanied by kings of sages. Identity, status, resources, cultivation, all of them could be said to be at the peak of a world and outstanding talents of the same cultivation realm. But in front of Lin Sun, they were like chickens and dogs. This, Yu Yunhe and the others were dumbfounded and shocked. How could they focus on comprehending the secrets of Emperor Yu's 9 cauldrons hydrological diagram when such a shocking chaotic battle occurred? Although they knew that Lin Sun's combat strength was heaven-defying, Yu Yunhe and the others were still shocked when they saw Lin Sun's unstoppable and domineering figure. Everyone, if you continue to hold back, no one will be able to fight for the fortune in Emperor Yu's divine palace. Shui Biyun said coldly. Behind her, the dark and cold sword image transformed into layers upon layers of ripples, faintly reflecting a peerless and imposing figure, instantly causing her entire aura to strengthen by a great deal. Dim Rainbow Dao Sword. It was an ancient treasure that had been strengthened by an Emperor Realm expert's supreme magic power. Rumble almost at the same time, in other directions, the peerless figures from various worlds gritted their teeth and displayed their trump cards. A dazzling flaming divine hammer appeared in Qi Lingzi's hand. From afar, it looked like he was holding a sun. A Tai Chi yin-yang diagram appeared beneath Li Yu's feet. Yin and yang blended together, separating the clear from the turbid. Lai Dongzhan held an ancient white bone seal in his hand, and countless demonic shadows appeared within it. These peerless figures were all outstanding talents of the world. They were either from ancient clans or large sects, so how could they not possess treasures that could be called forbidden treasures? They held treasures in their hands, and every single one of them had world-shaking auras. Nearby them, there were saint kings following them, and they joined forces, suppressing from different areas. Undoubtedly, after witnessing Lin Sun's terrifying means, they all began to fight desperately, not daring to hold back or hide anything. But the current Lin Sun was no longer the same as before. He suddenly stopped moving and calmly said, "I'm about to make a breakthrough. I'll take this opportunity to open your eyes and see what it means to be invincible in this realm." Suppress. Lin Sun looked down from the sky and took a deep breath. His figure turned into an endless abyss, and a terrible breath was released from his body. And one of his hands slapped down in the void. It was just a hand, but it turned into a furnace, which contained all kinds of great ways and deduced all kinds of unfathomable Taoism. It actually showed a kind of vast and heavy feeling that could suppress the past and the present. Boom! At this moment, a strange scene appeared in everyone's eyes. That figure turned into a great abyss, covering the sky and the sun, and his hand turned into a furnace of great ways, illuminating the sky. The blazing light, the roaring sound, the soaring divine power. At this moment, Lin Sun was like an invincible supreme being who would crush all obstacles. This was indeed Lin Sun's ultimate power in the great saint realm. After 6 years of tempering in the silent starry sky, it was the first time that he completely released his combat strength after his Taoism had been transformed to the extreme. Shui Biyun, Qi Lingzi, Li Yu, Lai Dongzhan, and others were all horrified. They couldn't suppress the depression in their hearts, and they felt suffocated and collapsed. How could this kind of power be possessed by the great saint realm? Originally, they were extremely confident in their trump cards, but when they saw Lin Sun's palm at this moment, they suddenly didn't have much confidence. Boom! Lin Sun's palm finally pressed down. Here, it was as if the sky and earth were turned upside down, the sun and the moon were reversed, and everything collapsed. It was almost impossible to describe this palm with words. The infinite light of the way, like the 9 heavens Milky Way, poured down from the big hand that covered the sky, filling up the universe. Before the palm power arrived, the void had collapsed and exploded. Bang, bang, bang! All kinds of ancient treasures, divine weapons, and Taoism skills whizzed out from the hands of the people present and bombarded the palm, but it was useless. Even if it was a peerlessly sharp and miraculous treasure, it was unable to break through the palm print that enveloped him. Kill. At this moment, everyone went crazy and risked their lives, feeling the fatal threat. But it was destined to be in vain. Lin Sun's cultivation was already extremely terrifying in the great saint realm, enough to dominate the past, present, and future. He could be said to be invincible in the heavens. At this moment, he released his power to the extreme. How could that kind of power be easily resisted? Boom! In front of Emperor Yu's divine palace, the ground shook violently. Countless restrictive forces surged like the tide, trying their best to resolve the aftermath of this palm. Even so, the nearby ground cracked like a spider web. When the smoke and dust dissipated, when the roar gradually subsided, a group of people were lying on the ground in disorder. Some of the ordinary, peerless great saints were crushed by the pressure of the palm. Some of the saint kings who rushed at the front were also killed, more than a dozen, and those who were not dead were seriously injured, lying in a pool of blood, screaming miserably. As for peerless figures like Chiliang-zi and Shuai-bian, they had life-saving secret treasures on them, so they didn't die. But even so, they were seriously injured and in a mess. Puff! Chiliang-zi coughed up blood, his face was pale, and his figure was badly mutilated. He couldn't get up again. Shuai-bian coughed violently. Her black dress was torn, revealing her snow-white skin, her hair was disheveled, and her face was full of horror and horror. The others were the same. Lin Sun's palm had suppressed all of them. Whether they were peerless great saints or saint kings, they were all suppressed, dead or injured. How could all this be described as terrifying? At first, whether it was Chiliang-zi, Shuai-bian, or other peerless figures, although they were surprised by Lin Sun's extraordinary combat power, they almost ignored him, because there was no saint king among Lin Sun's group. But at this moment, they bitterly understood why there was no saint king accompanying Lin Sun. There was no need at all. At this moment, everyone was lost, frightened, and uneasy. As for Yu Yunhe and the other two, they were also in a trance. Suppressed all of them with one palm. How could there be such a person in the world? Taoism Peer, I'm far inferior to you. I'm sincerely convinced. Shuai-bian was the first to bow her head and admit defeat. Lin Sun's eyes were cold. He glanced at her and said, "At the beginning, I warned you not to make a mistake." Everyone's expression froze. At that time, who knew that such a terrible thing would happen? Who had seen that a peerless great saint could kill saint kings like killing chickens and monkeys? Taoism Peer, we were all blind, so we made such a big mistake. I hope you can be merciful and let us go. Chiliang-zi swallowed his anger and said with difficulty, "We are all from the 9 worlds. If something happens to us, I'm afraid it will bring disaster to you." The others also spoke. All of them looked listless with a strong desire to survive. The more noble a person was, the more unwilling he was to die. On the contrary, ordinary people dared to fight with their lives when they were angry. Hearing this, Lin Sun glanced at Yu Yunhe and the others and sighed in his heart. If it were him, he wouldn't care about these things and would have killed them all. But now he couldn't do that. Yu Qingyang had given him guidance and help. If he did that, he could just leave, but the forces behind these people were bound to not let it go. At that time, they would definitely point the spear at Yu family, the imperial family. In the final analysis, it was because he didn't act alone this time, but with Yu Yunhe and the others, so he was worried and implicated. As these thoughts flashed in his mind, Lin Sun said, "Hand over your treasures, and I can forgive you. Remember, all of them. If you hide anything, I'll kill you without mercy." Even robbery couldn't be so cruel, right? Everyone was dumbfounded and their hearts trembled. They came from extraordinary backgrounds, so they were naturally very rich. Even the king of sages might not have some of their most precious treasures. Because they had a bright future and were destined to achieve limitless achievements in the future, they were specially taken care of by their elders and given precious treasures to protect themselves. But if they handed over all their treasures, they would definitely be severely punished when they returned. "Not willing," Lin Sun said indifferently, his black eyes cold. Everyone trembled. Looking at the blood and corpses on the ground, they thought of Lin Sun's cruel means and finally lowered their heads. After all, compared with their lives, treasures were after all external things. Next, Chiliang-zi and the others handed over their treasures one after another. They all looked submissive, but their hearts were bleeding. It was not easy for them to collect these treasures with their status, but now they all became others' trophies. "I'll let you be arrogant now. When we leave the Diyu secret realm, I'll make you spit out 10 times or even 100 times what you've taken." Qilingzi shouted with resentment in his heart. The others were also full of resentment, but they didn't show it on the surface. Boom! When a king of sages handed over his treasures, Lin Sun suddenly raised his hand and forced him to kneel on the ground. His tendons and bones were all broken. "You want to go back on your word?" The king of sages was furious, and the others were horrified. "I told you to hand over all your treasures, but you're not obedient," Lin Sun said and stretched out his hand. With a swoosh, a green divine needle that was as thin as a cow's hair flew out from the king of sages' hair. Lin Sun looked at it and realized that it was a storage treasure. The king of sages seemed to have a bad premonition and said with a trembling voice, "Please have mercy, I didn't do it on purpose." Bang! Chapter 1894. Lin Sun's eyes were cold as he glanced around. "You want to live without paying the price. How can there be such a good thing in this world?" Everyone's expression changed indeterminately. Whoosh! Suddenly, Liu broke a Taoist talisman in his hand. A dazzling divine light shrouded him, and he disappeared into thin air. Spatial teleportation would also produce energy fluctuations. However, under the envelopment of the talisman's power, the Sage King actually vanished into thin air, not leaving a single trace behind. Great Void Secret Talisman. Someone recognized it. Only those in the Emperor realm could refine such a treasure. Could ignore the rules of space, and was like a small transmission formation. It could disappear in an instant without causing any power fluctuations. It was extremely precious. This is a world covered by a Taoist forbidden formation. Can we escape? Lin Sun waved his sleeve. Boom! The Taoist forbidden formation in the distance shone with dazzling divine light. Then a scream came out. No! It was Liu's scream, full of fear and despair. But soon, his voice stopped abruptly and there was no more movement. At this moment, Qiling and the others were trembling with fear. Only now did they realize that Lin Sun had not only broken through the layers of Dao pattern restrictive arrays like a hot knife through butter, he had also become the first expert to reach Emperor Yu's celestial palace. He could even use the layers of Dao pattern restriction arrays that covered this place. If it was in other places, Liu could retreat safely with the help of the Great Void Secret Talisman. But now, he was in trouble. For a moment, no one dared to take chances and handed over all the treasures they had. "I wonder if this little girl can know your name?" Shui Biyun asked after hesitating for a moment. Lin Sun said with a faint smile, "Do you want to remember my name so that you can take revenge in the future?" Shui Biyun's face stiffened and she shook her head. "I dare not. It's already a great kindness for you to forgive us." Lin Daoyuan. Lin Sun told her his Taoist name. He was not afraid of being remembered. After leaving the secret realm of Diyu, he would leave this world. At that time, it would not be easy for the forces behind these guys to take revenge in the vast starry sky. "It's not that person." Shui Biyun seemed to be very surprised and disappointed at the same time. "Who?" Lin Sun said. "Fellow Daoist's cultivation is profound and your battle prowess is unparalleled. I almost thought that you were Lin Sun, who is currently ranked first on the Starry Sky Great Saints list." Shui Biyun answered honestly. "Lin Sun. It was just a name, but it caused everyone's pupils to constrict. That was a peerless, ruthless person who had killed so many people in the Kunlun ruins that even the successors of the 6 great Dao courts and the 10 great battle clans could not raise their heads. On the Starry Sky ancient path, who didn't know Lin Sun's fierce name. However, they did not think that Lin Sun was as powerful as Lin Daoyuan. After all, no matter how powerful Lin Sun was, he had only killed the ominous great sage. However, Lin Daoyuan could kill sage kings with ease. This subconscious cognition made them never associate Lin Sun with Lin Daoyuan from beginning to end. Only Lin Sun felt strange in his heart. In the end, Lin Sun didn't embarrass them. He pointed to the distance and let them leave. Qi Ling and the others hurriedly dragged their seriously injured bodies and left, as if they were afraid that Lin Sun would go back on his words. When they disappeared, Lin Sun turned around and looked at Emperor Yu's divine palace in the distance. He said, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and comprehend." Yu Yunhe and the others who were originally in shock seemed to have woken up from a dream. They nodded repeatedly and took action. Lin Sun took advantage of this free time to check the spoils of war he had just plundered. There were dozens of saint treasures of different quality, mountains of divine medicines and divine materials, bottles and jars of medicinal pills, and all kinds of rare treasures that were overflowing with brilliant lights. The harvest was so great that it was difficult to estimate its value. The most intuitive harvest was the number of Tao crystals, which added up to more than 3 million. It made Lin Sun sigh in his heart. No one could be rich without a windfall, however. After thinking about it, he felt relieved. For example, Qi Ling and the others were all geniuses of the world. They were born into noble families, so they were naturally rich. "I got it, I got it!" Suddenly Yu Yunhe shouted. He looked excited and beamed with joy. It turns out that the 9 cauldrons water harnessing diagram of Emperor Yu is the inheritance left by our ancestor. Beside him, Yu Yunfeng and Yu Yunlong opened their eyes. They couldn't hide their disappointment and envy. They were all disciples of Yu clan, but they had no fate with the inheritance of their ancestor. Lin Sun couldn't help but be surprised. "Brother Lin, let's not delay. Let's enter the palace together," Yu Yunhe said. "Okay." Lin Sun nodded. The group moved. With a gentle push, the ancient and majestic palace door opened slowly in front of them. Outside the 9 Cauldrons mountain. "We lost a lot of soldiers and returned without any achievement. This trip is really a double loss." Qi Ling, Shui Biyun and the others looked at each other and saw the bitterness in each other's eyes. Feelings of regret, rage, and resentment seemed to be fermenting as they spread and seethed in their hearts, causing their expressions to change indeterminately. They thought that it would be a gathering of the elites of the 9 realms. Who would have thought that such a ruthless person like Lin Sun would appear? They were all seriously injured. Their clothes were stained with blood and they were dispirited. They couldn't hide it from others when they walked out of the 9 Cauldrons mountain range. Soon, the truth about the bloody battle in front of Emperor Yu's celestial palace spread quickly. The cultivators who were looking for opportunities in the Diyu mystery realm were all shocked and in an uproar. The news spread from 1 to 10 and from 10 to 100. In the end, it spread outside the Diyu mystery realm. The countless cultivators waiting outside were dumbstruck, and they were repeatedly shocked. Lin Daoyuan, who moved with the disciples of Yu clan, entered Emperor Yu's celestial palace. Lin Daoyuan alone suppressed the heroes of the 9 realms. He suppressed everyone with one palm. Lin Daoyuan killed a great sage as if he was tearing a painting. He killed a king of sages as if he was slaughtering chickens and monkeys. Every piece of news was like a shocking hurricane that caused a huge uproar. Then, it started to sweep across the entire Diyu world. The influential figures from the 9 realms and the great Tao orthodoxies and tribes of the Diyu world were all shocked when they heard about it. At this moment, Lin Daoyuan's name resounded in the sky of the Diyu world, in the Yu clan of Jiuhua Divine Mountain. When the news about Lin Sun spread out, all the clansmen of the Yu clan, including Yu Bikong, were in a trance for a while. How could that boy surnamed Lin be so cruel? Yu Bikong and the others were both happy and worried. They were happy that Yu Yunhe and the other juniors would be able to get unexpected and amazing benefits from Emperor Yu's celestial palace. They were worried that Lin Sun's action would completely offend the top forces from the 9 realms. It was like poking a hornet's nest. It was even very likely that this storm would implicate the Yu clan. "No, this matter is of great importance. I have to ask Ancestor Qingyang." Yu Bikong took a deep breath and made a decision. However, when she saw Yu Qingyang, the answer she got stunned her. "Inform the world that Lin Daoyuan has nothing to do with the Yu clan." If anyone has the ability to kill him, they can do so. This was Yu Qingyang's answer. Ancestor, this. Yu Bikong hesitated for a moment. Wasn't this a little too decisive? It was like burning the bridge after crossing it. Go. Yu Qingyang didn't explain anymore. Yes. Yu Bikong suppressed her doubts and left in a hurry. Ancestor, how can you do this? Nan Qiu, who had been watching everything from the side, turned deathly pale. She bit her lips so hard that they almost bled. Silly girl, don't worry. How could I harm my savior? Yu Qingyang couldn't help laughing. He was very clear that Lin Sun would definitely break through the realm if nothing went wrong. With Lin Sun's foundation, when he became a peerless holy king, who in the Diu world could be his opponent? Even the top figures of the Emperor-to-be would have a hard time suppressing him. As for the Emperor-to-be, how could they fight over such a trivial matter? Unless Lin Sun exposed his true identity, he might arouse the attention of the Emperor-to-be and fight. Seeing that Nan Qiu was still nervous, Yu Qingyang couldn't help but laugh. He looked at the distant sky and said slowly, "What's more, you still have me." Such an understatement might be insignificant if it was said by others. But when it came from the mouth of the Qingyang Saber Emperor, who had shocked the starry sky and dominated the world for 8,000 years, its weight was enough to make the whole world tremble. Nan Qiu felt a little relieved and let out a long breath. Star Jade Sword Pavilion. The number one orthodoxy in the Diu world. The incident that occurred in the Diu secret realm also spread to the stellar Jade Sword Pavilion at the first possible moment, and it caused a great stir for a time. The reason was that the top figures of the 9 realms did not act alone this time. Instead, they were accompanied by their seniors or clan elders. The bigwigs of the top forces of the 9 realms gathered in the Star Jade Sword Pavilion and discussed matters in a hall. Lin Daoyuan? A peerless great saint who can kill a king saint? Is there such a heaven-defying figure in this world? Someone was surprised. No matter who he is, he must be killed for daring to attack the juniors around us so viciously. Someone was furious. What did the Yu clan say? Someone frowned and pondered. They said that Lin Daoyuan has nothing to do with the Yu clan. They told us not to worry and to attack. Many bigwigs were stunned when they heard such an answer. What? What is the Yu clan thinking? Are they worried that we will vent our anger on them, so they want to sacrifice the pawn to protect the king? There was a lot of discussion. Everyone, take your time. I'm going out for a walk. Suddenly, a white-haired man in snow-white clothes stood up and walked out of the hall. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly became silent. The discussion stopped and it was dead silent. Feng Ruxue. He was the top peerless great saint king in the Rui Jin Great World. He was a peerless sword cultivator who had traveled the world with a sword for 3,000 years and had never tasted defeat. Anyone who saw him seemed to see a divine sword hanging high in the sky, shining brightly like the sun. Seeing the white-robed Feng Ruxue leave alone, the big shots from the 9 realms all had different expressions on their faces. They knew that Feng Ruxue was going to kill. Chapter 1895. They were different from the people in the outside world who did not know the details. At this moment, the great figures sitting in the main hall of the Star Sword Pavilion already knew that Qi Lingzi and the other juniors seemed to have suffered heavy losses and returned in low spirits. But in the end, they managed to keep their lives. This proved that the young man called Lin Daoyuan did not really intend to kill them. Therefore, these great figures gathered together to discuss countermeasures after hearing the news, and did not act rashly and attack directly. After all, it was only an operation to fight for opportunities. It was inevitable that there would be casualties. Moreover, this was the Great Yu world. The Imperial Yu clan seemed to have declined in recent years, but their ancient heritage was still not to be underestimated. These great figures from other worlds also had to weigh the consequences of making a move. But unlike them, Feng Ruxue from the Sharp Gold Great World did not hesitate to take action because Li Yu was dead. Li Yu was the most dazzling genius of the sword doctrine in the sharp gold great world, an absolute great saint who was almost invincible among his peers. At the same time, Li Yu was the junior that Feng Rushua valued the most. Under such circumstances, it would be strange if Feng Rushua did not make a move. Everyone, the Yu clan has already made their stance clear. We naturally do not have to worry anymore. Lin Daoyuan ran amok, how can we not punish him? Someone broke the silence and spoke in a deep voice. According to my knowledge, I've never heard of a junior like Lin Daoyuan in the Diu world in the past. With the ability he revealed, if he was a cultivator of the Diu world, I'm afraid he would be renowned throughout the world a long time ago. An elder in a green robe from the Star Sword sect spoke. Instantly, everyone revealed a thoughtful expression. You think that Lin Daoyuan is not a cultivator of the great Yu world? Someone asked. That's right. The elder in a green robe nodded. Don't you find it strange that even in the entire Purple Heng starfield, Lin Daoyuan is an extraordinary figure among the absolute great saints? But have you all heard of his name? Everyone's eyes flickered as they realized something was amiss. Not to mention, an absolute great saint who can fight against many and kill a saint king is extremely rare even on the Starry Sky ancient path. If we were to rank him on the Starry Sky Great Saint board, his battle prowess would definitely be in the top 3. A strange look appeared on the old man's face, but there's only Lin Sun who's ranked first on the Starry Sky Saint ranking. There's no young man named Lin Daoyuan. Is he Lin Sun? Someone couldn't help but say. With a single sentence, the hall fell silent. Great waves arose in the hearts of every single great figure. Lin Sun. 6 years ago, a young man whose name shook the Starry Sky's ancient path had relied on the bloody massacre in the Kunlun ruins to make the Starry Sky tremble. The 6 major Dao courts and the 10 major battle clans viewed him as prey that they had to kill, and so they issued one alluring bounty after another. The 2 giants of the Dark World, the Divine Sunshine Ancient Sect and the Hidden Land Realm, also saw him as a thorn in their sides and searched for him all over the world. But more importantly, Lin Sun held a big secret of becoming an emperor or ancestor. Because of this, even some emperor realm existences were envious and moved by it. If Lin Daoyuan is really that Lin Sun, at the thought of this, the hearts of all the great figures present became boiling hot, and their expressions became more and more subtle. Regardless of whether he's Lin Sun or not, he should be severely punished for his evil deeds in the Diu secret realm. A man in a red robe suddenly stood up with a murderous aura. Everyone, I'll make a move first. After saying that, he turned around and teleported away. For a moment, the atmosphere in the hall became restless. Everyone could tell that the man in a red robe probably had other thoughts. He suspected that Lin Daoyuan was Lin Sun. Why don't you come with me to the Diu secret realm? The elder in a green robe from the Star Jade Sword sect stood up and said in a deep voice. Everyone looked at each other. Soon, some people nodded in agreement. Some shook their heads and rejected the mission with other thoughts. But no matter who it was, they had a hunch that Lin Daoyuan, who had been abandoned by the Imperial Yu clan, might not be able to walk out of the Diu secret realm. While the entire Diu world was in an uproar, Lin Sun was strolling in the divine palace of Emperor Yu. This mysterious ancient palace was left by the ancestor of the Imperial Yu clan. The inside of the palace was like a vast and empty world. In the sky above the palace, there were 9 big cauldrons, all of which were transformed by the power of the origin of chaos. The light of Tao was flowing, and the air of chaos was misty, exuding a primitive, ancient and supreme aura. As soon as Yu Yunhe, Yu Yunfeng, and Yu Yunlong entered the hall, their eyes were attracted by the 9 big cauldrons. At this moment, they were sitting cross-legged and meditating. The origin of chaos was the rarest kind of power in the world. The world was formed from the chaos. It was no exaggeration to say that the birth of a world originated from the origin of chaos. If one could absorb and refine some of the origin of chaos, he would definitely have insight into the mystery of the world's rules, which would be of great help to break through the realm and reach the Saint King realm. Yu Yunhe and the other two would not miss such a great opportunity. In those days, Emperor, you should have cast the 9 cauldrons here. Lin Sun strolled in the hall with his hands behind his back. His mind was completely empty as he felt the 9 big cauldrons formed by the origin of chaos. All kinds of comprehension surged into his mind. Finally, he stopped and looked at the 9 big cauldrons like lightning. Then, he took a step into the void. Boom! The whole hall roared instantly. The 9 big cauldrons released a terrible wave of the law of chaos, which made Lin Sun breathless and felt a fatal threat. Lin Sun retracted his foot and the wave of the law of chaos disappeared. It seems that even a saint king would not be able to take away the origin of chaos in the 9 big cauldrons, let alone a great sage. No wonder the 9 big cauldrons have not been taken away even though the divine palace of Emperor Yu has existed for so many years. Lin Sun was deep in thought. He remembered Yu Qingyang's advice. He said that the layout of the 9 cauldrons suppressed the world, was immeasurable for condensing and refining the realm of Tao. Obviously, this benefit came from the 9 big cauldrons in front of him. The time has come. There's no need to wait any longer. Lin Sun no longer hesitated and took another step into the void. Boom! The origin of chaos was released again. The strands of chaotic aura were misty like a rain of light, and they were obscure and profound. The level of energy they emanated revealed a supreme aura that was eternal and indestructible. It was too extraordinary, and the might it created was terrifying beyond imagination. It could be seen that Lin Sun's clothes were torn in an instant. Cracks and bloodstains appeared on his body that was comparable to a divine weapon. But Lin Sun did not retreat at all. He stepped forward step by step. A tidal wave of light spread out from Lin Sun's body and fought against the origin of chaos. The higher he went and the closer he was to the 9 big cauldrons, the more intense the origin of chaos was. Just a wisp of it could crush mountains and rivers. Boom! The 9 big cauldrons roared violently as if they had been provoked. "Brother Lin, be careful!" Yu Yunhe exclaimed. His expression changed drastically. He never thought that Lin Sun would go close to the 9 big cauldrons. It was too dangerous. According to his understanding, no cultivator had dared to do this since ancient times. After all, it was the origin of chaos. Who dared to touch it except for the existences of the Emperor realm? Like him, Yu Yunfeng and Yu Yunlong, they only sat cross-legged on the ground and used their own strength to comprehend and understand it. They did not dare to approach it. "Don't worry. I'm just taking this opportunity to trigger the tribulation of breaking the realm," Lin Sun said. His black eyes were firm. The opportunity he sought was different from that of others. It was sought by himself. Just like at this moment, when he saw the 9 big cauldrons transformed from the origin of chaos, Lin Sun knew that it was imperative to break the realm. As for the opportunity, there was no need to wait at all. In the absolute domain, it was like this during the tribulation of breaking the king realm. It was the same during the tribulation of breaking the saint path in the 9 regions battlefield. Now, he was going to break the tribulation of Saint King extinction. Breaking the realm? Yu Yunhe was shocked. His own understanding was almost overturned. Was there such a bizarre way to break the realm in this world? What's more, the tribulation of breaking the realm was vague, and it was extremely difficult to predict when it would come. Because of this, almost all the cultivators in this world would choose to go into seclusion to prepare for the tribulation after they reached the completion of a realm. The reason was that they were worried that they would suddenly trigger the tribulation when they went out and be caught off guard. But Lin Sun actually took the initiative to seek it. Yu Yunfeng and Yu Yunlong were also stunned. Extraordinary people do extraordinary things. Breaking the realm and passing the tribulation are naturally extraordinary, Yu Yunfeng murmured. Boom! Suddenly, an obscure and oppressive thunderclap resounded, and it seemed as if it came from the distant horizon, yet it fiercely shook the hearts of everyone. At this moment, Lin Sun's figure suddenly stopped. He turned around and returned to the ground. His clothes were ragged and he looked disheveled. But his back was straight like a sword and his eyes were as bright as stars. "It's coming," Lin Sun said. At the same time, outside the divine palace of Emperor Yu, the land within a radius of 3,000 miles above the Nine Pinnacles mountain range was covered by black tribulation clouds that were as thick as ink. It was like falling into the eternal night. Bolts of tribulation thunder surged like dragons and rolled in the depths of the tribulation clouds. They shone with different colors and were faintly discernible. At this moment, all the cultivators in the entire Yu secret realm trembled. Their faces changed in horror and their hair stood on end. They only felt as if doomsday had come. There was a great terror pressing on their souls, making them breathless. Who was going to pass the tribulation? Coincidentally, all eyes looked in the same direction. Boom! The depressing and oppressive atmosphere was also broken at this moment by a thunderous sound that shook the 9 heavens. Many cultivators saw stars and their blood was boiling. It was just a thunderous sound that was so far away, but it made them feel extremely sad. Then, they saw many strange phenomena reflected in the sky. There were purple tribulation thunder that condensed into flowers of Tao and bloomed in the depths of the black tribulation clouds. There were green tribulation thunder that condensed into shadows of gods overlooking the world. There were red tribulation thunder that condensed into bronze cauldrons that rumbled and operated. There were silver tribulation thunder that turned into the sun, moon, and stars that circulated endlessly. It was a spectacle that shocked the world. Chapter 1896. The tribulation thunder had arrived and was about to fall. Lin Sun walked out of Emperor Yu's celestial palace and looked up into the sky. He saw that the tribulation clouds were deep and that all sorts of terrifying lightning dragons were rolling within. The destructive aura they released was shocking. At this moment, Yu Yunhe and the others could only stay in Emperor Yu's celestial palace and did not dare to go out. The aura of the tribulation made their Taoist hearts tremble, and they could not calm down. Rumble! With a roar that shook the 9 heavens, a bolt of lightning that seemed to pierce through the heavens and the earth roared as it descended from the sky. This was the tribulation of a sage king. It was extremely terrifying. Since ancient times, countless experts had perished under this tribulation. But usually the first tribulation was the weakest. But in Lin Sun's eyes, the tribulation thunder that descended from the sky was as thick as the Milky Way. The lightning transformed into a waterfall that poured down from the 9 heavens, illuminating the mountains and rivers. Oh my God! Yu Yunhe and the others were dumbfounded. This was only the beginning, and the power of the tribulation thunder was already so terrifying. Wouldn't it become more and more terrifying as it progressed? They had seen the tribulation of a sage king before. When the important figures of the Yu clan underwent the tribulation, the juniors would watch from the side. But they had never seen one as terrifying as the tribulation thunder before them. Without a doubt, the tribulation of a sage king that Lin Sun had triggered was not ordinary. "I've been waiting for you for a long time." Lin Sun was unperturbed. His figure rose up without any cover and he faced the tribulation thunder with his bare fists. The tribulation was both a crisis and an opportunity. It was born from the heavens and represented the will of the great Tao. It was seen as a punishment from the heavens. This could be seen from the word tribulation. This word was formed from the words remove and power. The meaning was self-evident. It was to remove the power of cultivation. If a cultivator had no power of cultivation, he would naturally perish. This was tribulation, and the tribulation was usually made up of lightning and punishment from the heavens. It was also very particular. Lightning was the source of destruction and the beginning of life. In the midst of destruction, there was a sliver of life. This was lightning. In spring, when lightning moved, life would flourish and all things would come to life. What was displayed was the Tao of life contained in lightning. It was the same for the tribulation. If one could not endure it, they would perish and their souls would perish. If one overcame it, then one would be able to seize a chance at survival, break through, and undergo a tremendous change that was like rebirth. Bang, bang, bang! The silver tribulation thunder, which was as terrible as a waterfall of the Milky Way, hit Lin Sun's body, causing a series of dazzling lightning sparks and a dull roar. He deduced his own Tao and technique and transformed it into a great abyss that actually swallowed, absorbed, and refined all the tribulation lightning that blasted down towards him, and used it to temper his skin, tendons, bones, and vital energy. Lin Sun's figure was shining like a crystal-clear diamond, with twisted electric arcs flashing on his skin. How terrifying was that destructive energy! Yet it was actually unable to harm him at all. In next to no time, the first wave of tribulation lightning was completely neutralized. Yu Yunhe and the others gasped, their jaws almost dropping to the ground. Was this even possible? But before they could react, the second wave of tribulation lightning had already poured down. Rumble! Rumble! This time, it was purple-colored lightning tribulation that condensed into great Tao flowers. They were dense and brilliant as they scattered down from the sky dome. Every single tribulation lightning Tao flower was branded with the will and laws of destruction, and it was so beautiful and so terrifying. Not to mention Yu Yunhe and the others, even the cultivators that were watching from different areas of the Deu secret realm were dazed and felt disbelief. Because they'd never seen, heard, or even heard of such a mysterious and unfathomable tribulation lightning. Lin Sun stood in the sky, took a deep breath, and deduced his own Tao. His entire body was like a great abyss that lay across the sky, deep and boundless, and he circulated it with all his might as if he wanted to swallow the heavens and the earth. As soon as the violet tribulation lightning Tao flowers descended, they bloomed densely within the abyss, and their stamens spat out strands of frightening violet lightning. The destructive energy they contained caused Yu Yunhe and the others to feel their scalps go numb just by looking at it from afar, and their souls almost left their bodies. It was the will of the heavens that had been condensed to the extreme, and it was an extreme method of heavenly punishment. In an instant, hundreds and thousands of stamens bloomed within the abyss, and violet lightning flowed, causing the entire abyss to tremble and rumble violently. But in the end, Lin Sun resisted it. His breathing surged like wind and thunder, and the aura around his body was like a boiling furnace that maintained the stability of the entire abyss. Those tribulation lightning Tao flowers that would cause any sage king to feel despair withered and were annihilated within the abyss after they bloomed to the extreme. The trace of vitality of the heavenly Tao that they released was completely absorbed by Lin Sun to refine his body and strengthen his body and soul. Brother Lin is too ferocious. Yu Yunhe and the others were drenched in cold sweat, and they had yet to recover from the shock. The Sage King Tao tribulation was extremely terrifying to begin with, and even the most dazzling figures in the world were extremely careful when they transcended the tribulation. They would either activate numerous formations to protect themselves, or use the secret treasures of their sex to resolve the tribulation. Even so, those who were able to transcend the tribulation had a slim chance of survival, and only 1 in 1,000 would survive. But Lin Sun seemed to be completely different. His Sage King Tao tribulation was unbelievably powerful, and it was unprecedented and unheard of. This was enough to cause anyone to feel despair, but he transcended the tribulation as easily as eating and drinking. Even if an old monster reincarnated, it's impossible for him to be so powerful. Yu Yunhe and the others sighed. Rumble. The lightning tribulation did not stop, and it became even more intense. The tribulation clouds were as black as ink, and the tribulation lightning was like a dragon, rolling and roaring, shining with different lights. In the end, the green tribulation lightning transformed into the shadow of a god, and the lightning spear in its fingers tore through the sky and struck down. At that moment, countless cultivators in the deistic realm were shocked, and their bodies trembled in fear. A tribulation lightning that transformed into the dharma of a god? There was also a rumor on the starry sky ancient path that in the primordial times there was a peerless genius transcending the tribulation, and he provoked the jealousy of the heavens, causing the tribulation lightning of a god to descend. Anyone who came into contact with it would definitely die. But now, such an illusory legend had actually come true. Who is transcending the tribulation? Could it be Lin Daoyuan? It must be him. Previously, he suppressed the geniuses of the 9 realms by himself, and he was extremely powerful. Isn't he the same as the legendary peerless genius from the primordial times? Countless voices of shock rose and fell, and they were guessing the identity of the person who was transcending the tribulation. However, the distance was too far, and the restriction of the 9 Pinnacles mountain range was obstructed, so they were utterly unable to see the appearance of the person who was transcending the tribulation. At this moment, Lin Sun was already fighting fiercely with the green lightning tribulation shadow. Boom! Lightning rumbled, and the sound of Tao shook the sky. The godlike figure of tribulation lightning held the lightning spear in its hand, and it carried boundless killing intent and drew the destructive force of the heavens, as if it was the embodiment of the will of the heavens. On the other hand, Lin Sun fought it barehanded. His figure was like a great abyss that swallowed the sky, and his Tao was like a furnace that suppressed the world. For a time, the sky was in chaos, and the turbulence was like the end of the world. Puff! Not long after, Lin Sun's shoulder was pierced by a spear, and blood splattered. He turned a blind eye to it, and he stretched out his arm and twisted it. The great abyss rumbled, and with a grab, he tore off the arm of the godlike figure, causing thunderstorms to pour down like a waterfall. This arm transformed into pure and surging lightning, and it was completely devoured by Lin Sun to temper both inside and outside of his body. Again, Lin Sun's cold eyes were like lightning, and he was full of fighting intent. The godlike figure flickered, and its broken arm grew back. With a thunderous sound, it attacked again, as if it had been infuriated, and it became more and more terrifying. Even if Lin Sun fought with all his might, in the end, his body was blasted to the point that blood flowed, his muscles cracked, and his flesh was torn. His muscles exploded one after another, revealing his sparkling and resplendent bones that were like divine gold. The scene of serious injuries made Yu Yunhe and others break out in a cold sweat, and their hearts were hanging in their throat. According to the legend, the peerless genius that had once triggered the godlike figure of tribulation lightning was doomed to die. Could Lin Sun get through it? As soon as this thought came into their minds, they saw Lin Sun let out a roar like a dragon above the sky. The great abyss behind him covered, and with a bang it completely swallowed the godlike figure. This! Yu Yunhe and the others were stunned speechless. The 3rd tribulation lightning vanished like smoke in thin air. After swallowing the entire godlike figure formed by the tribulation lightning, although Lin Sun was seriously injured, his aura was undergoing earth-shaking changes. The surging vitality of the tribulation lightning was undoubtedly the most precise and magical power in the world. After being refined by Lin Sun gradually, it turned into a kind of power to break through the realm. He got through it? In the Dayu's secret realm, the heroes were in a trance and their guts were trembling. The 1st tribulation lightning was like the Milky Way falling from the 9th heaven, majestic and boundless. The 2nd tribulation lightning was condensed into the flower of Dao, which bloomed to the extreme and destroyed to the extreme. The 3rd tribulation lightning transformed into the godlike figure, which was the most terrifying. It was said that the peerless genius in the primitive times had suffered from this tribulation. Now, the 3rd tribulation lightning had ended, but these cultivators didn't know whether the person who crossed the tribulation was dead or alive. But soon there was a cry of surprise. No, why is there still more? The tribulation lightning is not over yet. Above the sky, not only did the thunderclouds not dissipate, but they became more condensed. The colorful tribulation lightning was dazzling, and it seemed to be brewing a powerful killing move. Witnessing such a scene, everyone was shocked and in disbelief. Since ancient times, no matter who crossed the tribulation lightning of the king sage, it would end with the third tribulation lightning. But now, something unexpected happened. One should know that even the tribulation lightning of the king sage was also three tribulation lightning, but its power was extremely great and far from ordinary. They had never heard of such an unbelievable change when crossing the tribulation lightning of the king sage. This is unprecedented and unheard of, many people gasped. Such a shocking change could only prove that the person who crossed the tribulation was too heaven-defying. The power he controlled and the path he pursued had probably touched the forbidden area. At this moment, without giving Lin Sun time to recover completely, the fourth tribulation lightning descended. Boom! The monstrous crimson tribulation lightning transformed into a copper furnace that tore through the sky and descended. The copper furnace was so large that it was like a divine mountain, and it surged with boundless crimson tribulation lightning. The radiance it emanated dyed the heavens and the earth red like blood. Everyone who saw this scene was dumbfounded. The tribulation lightning furnace. Throughout the ages, who had seen it before? Chapter 1897. Brother Lin, Yu Yunhe and the others couldn't sit still at all. They were so nervous that their bodies were stiff. The fourth Saint King's tribulation? If this matter was spread out, it would definitely shock the Deyu world and even the whole starry ancient road. Time went by. The bronze furnace transformed by the tribulation thunder was shining under the sky and roaring. It was impossible to know Lin Sun's situation. But everyone knew that the fourth thunder tribulation was destined to be horrible beyond imagination. Boom! After a quarter of an hour, the furnace transformed by the red thunder tribulation in the sky suddenly burst into pieces. The blazing thunder light cut through the sky, dazzling. Lin Sun's figure fell directly from the void and fell thousands of feet down. His muscles all over his body were cracked, and the healed wounds were broken again. Brother Lin, Yu Yunhe cried out in shock. What are you shouting for? You're not dead yet. Lin Sun's voice came out in the rapid gasping. His figure wriggled and quickly healed in the void. His embarrassed figure became straight as a sword again, looking down on others as before. Yu Yunhe was stunned and clenched his fists excitedly. The fourth thunder tribulation had been passed. What a divine man! Yu Yunfeng and Yu Yunlong were both excited. Lin Sun's arrogant, strong, and unyielding demeanor made their blood boil. On the other hand, to the cultivators that were scattered throughout Deyu world, it was like they'd witnessed an unprecedented miracle occur. It was world-shaking and unprecedented, but it was nothing more than this. Up until now, Lin Sun still had a lingering fear in his heart. Because he'd experienced the tribulation and bombardment within the divine furnace formed from the tribulation lightning. He felt like a medicinal pill that was undergoing endless tempering, and it simply felt like he'd fallen into purgatory. It's finally over, Lin Sun breathed a long sigh of relief. He could clearly feel that his body, soul, state of mind, and even his cultivation all seemed to have broken the shackles and produced amazing and wonderful changes. However, just when he was about to meditate and feel, boom, there was a sudden violent vibration in the depths of the 3,000-mile tribulation cloud. Lin Sun took the lead and his pupils couldn't help shrinking. In the depths of the thunderclouds, a golden Dharma form appeared out of thin air. It was a phantom that seemed like a dragon yet wasn't a dragon, like a snake yet wasn't a snake. It was 3 kilometers in size, and it stood on a sea of tribulation lightning while the sun, moon, and stars coiled around its body. Its pupils were like vortexes of tribulation lightning, and it emanated a supreme dignified aura of looking down upon all living beings. When it appeared, the entire Deyu secret realm shook. The mountains, grass, and trees rustled and the void wailed. It was as if the will of the heavens had manifested in the mortal world. The eternal, supreme, and destructive imposing aura it emanated oppressed some cultivators to the point they fell weakly to the ground while their souls were on the verge of collapse. Even a few individuals with powerful cultivations were trembling, their faces deathly pale, on the verge of collapse. After the fourth lightning tribulation, this unprecedented tribulation wasn't over yet. What kind of calamity is this? Yu Yunhe and the others were the closest to Lin Sun. If it wasn't for the protection of Emperor Yu's celestial palace, they wouldn't have been able to withstand the terrifying heavenly might. Even so, they only felt a kind of fear emerging from the depths of their souls. It was the absolute awe of power, which couldn't be resolved or suppressed at all. At the same time, Lin Sun's expression was unprecedentedly solemn. He felt a trace of familiar aura. It was similar to the 3 taboo Tao tribulations that shrouded the ancient desolation realm. It was the aura of power that had killed the holy monk Du Ji and the Black Phoenix Holy Queen. Even if I seek the unprecedented Tao in the whole world, it shouldn't cause such a terrible tribulation. This tribulation is clearly aimed at me. Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep and terrifying. The emergence of the fourth lightning tribulation was already an unexpected accident. When the fifth lightning tribulation appeared, it was no longer an accident, but an anomaly. Boom! The world roared and the sky seemed to collapse. The phantom that looked like a snake and a dragon seemed to wake up from silence, and the power it released became more and more terrifying. The lightning tribulation all turned into a part of its body. At this moment, everyone in the secret realm of Deyu felt a stabbing pain in their eyes, and their souls went blank. They couldn't see anything anymore, as if their sixth senses had been abandoned. So did Yu Yunhe and others. This kind of thunder tribulation couldn't be measured by common sense. It was so strange that it could be called a taboo. Between heaven and earth, only Lin Sun stood in the void. In his state of mind, soul, and even physical instinct, there was an uncontrollable sense of fatal danger. His expression was as solemn as water. Boom! The phantom of thunder tribulation moved. It raised a huge palm that covered the sky and slapped down. Suddenly, the world was torn apart, the space was broken, and the space-time storm was raging. Before the giant palm arrived, the restrictive power covering the divine palace of Emperor Yu collapsed as if it couldn't bear the heavy load. The huge 9 Pinnacles mountain was exposed, but then it began to collapse. Lin Sun wouldn't sit still and wait for death. Fight! He rushed up, and a big abyss emerged behind him. His power was deduced to the extreme, and even the power of the spiritual vein was activated. Under such circumstances, there was no way to retreat or avoid. Bang! In an instant, like an ant trying to shake a tree, Lin Sun was directly slapped down from the sky. His body smashed into the ground, and his flesh, tendons, and bones were almost completely broken. The power of the phantom of thunder tribulation was beyond Lin Sun's imagination. Again, Lin Sun rushed up against it. He was covered with bright Taoist light, like a big sun rushing to the sky. Bang! Once again, Lin Sun was smashed down from the sky. His body was broken, and blood was flowing. It was extremely miserable. Lin Sun had passed many thunder tribulations since he started his cultivation, but it was the first time that he encountered such an indestructible and terrifying thunder tribulation. If it were someone else, he would have been desperate and abandoned himself to despair. But Lin Sun gritted his teeth and rushed up again. At his level of cultivation, even if there was only a remnant soul or a drop of blood left, there was still a chance to recover. Not to mention that he had mastered the law of immortality. Go on! Lin Sun's fighting spirit was boiling, and his blood was surging. All kinds of Taoist magic were deduced from Lin Sun's hands. The more he was defeated, the braver he became. In the end, his body was torn apart, and only his spirit was left, maintaining an unyielding and tenacious will to resist with all his strength. Boom! The phantom of thunder tribulation stretched out its giant palm and slapped Lin Sun again. Its palm and fingers were full of the forbidden power of calamity, and the breath of destruction was amazing. Lin Sun took a deep breath and presented the Tower of Endless Tao. Finally, he blocked the blow, but the tower was shaken away. The phantom of thunder tribulation suddenly opened its mouth and spat out a beam of thunder tribulation, which reflected the image of the sun, the moon, and the galaxy. Lin Sun didn't care about anything else at all. He presented the infinite Tao bottle, the broken sword, the insignificant bow, and other treasures one after another. But under the bombardment of the beam of thunder tribulation, they all collapsed one by one. Seeing that the world-destroying blow was coming, Lin Sun gritted his teeth and presented the 3,000 floating and sinking. Almost at the same time, a wonderful feeling came to his heart. The inherited power, which had turned into the pattern of the crescent moon and 3 stars in Lin Sun's body, suddenly felt hot. At this moment, Lin Sun felt like being held by the right hand of a god. He clung to the 3,000 floating and sinking and gently swept it in the void. Boom! The world was turned upside down. The blazing beam of thunder tribulation seemed to be washed away by an irresistible force and disappeared in the void at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the sky, the phantom of thunder tribulation seemed to be hit hard. Its body suddenly rolled violently, and the strange and horrible breath of calamity became weaker and weaker. It was as if a peerless master had suddenly lost all his strength. It turns out that this is not my tribulation to break through the realm at all, but a strange taboo power. If it weren't for the 3,000 floating and sinking left by my master, I'm afraid I couldn't resist this taboo power no matter how powerful I was. Looking at the horsetail whisk in his hand, Lin Sun understood. There was always a slim chance of survival when a practitioner went through a tribulation. But there was no chance of survival at all in the 5th tribulation. It was obvious that the 5th tribulation was going to wipe him out. Where does this taboo power come from? Thinking of this, Lin Sun looked uncertain. If it weren't for the 3,000 floating and sinking, he might not have been able to escape this time. In the sky, the tribulation clouds rolled, and the phantom of thunder tribulation finally collapsed, turning into a sea of bright and pure lightning, which poured down and was absorbed by Lin Sun and contained in his body. It was visible to the naked eye that his broken body was reconstructed at an amazing speed. In the end, his whole body was bathed in thunder tribulation, undergoing a new transformation after breaking through the realm. When Lin Sun's body was completely condensed, his breath instantly soared and rose steadily to a level that was unimaginable to the world. It was as high as the sky, as high as the sun and the moon, immortal and immortal. It was also at this time that the tribulation clouds covering a range of 3,000 miles in the sky finally collapsed and disappeared, and the sky became clear again. As soon as Yu Yunhe and others, whose 6 senses were abandoned and their bodies and minds fell into a vast blankness, they saw a shocking scene. In the sky, Lin Sun stood in the void, blooming with bright Taoist light, as if he was the only center between heaven and earth, just like a ruler. So invincible, so proud. Have we finally passed through? Yu Yunhe and others were stunned, thinking of all the horrible scenes that happened before, as if it was a lifetime ago. Swoosh! Lin Sun floated down and entered Emperor Yu's celestial palace. I want to seal this place, firstly to temper and stabilize my cultivation, and secondly to condense the realm of Tao. During this period, I have to trouble the 3 of you to stay here. Yu Yunhe and others nodded subconsciously. Lin Sun waved his sleeve, and the palace gate closed with a loud bang. Then, countless formation diagrams emerged and covered the entire palace. Then, he approached the 9 cauldrons hanging in the void of the palace. The previous tribulation was so terrifying that the nearby mountains and rivers exploded and collapsed, but Emperor Yu's celestial palace was safe and sound. This was because the palace was covered by an extremely magical prohibition power. At this time, Lin Sun was just using the prohibition power to close the palace tightly. Almost at the same time, outside the Diyu mystery realm, Feng Rushue, dressed in snow-white clothes, moved through the void like a peerless divine sword. His expression was indifferent and he looked around. Finally, he looked at the entrance of the Diyu mystery realm. Swoosh! In the next moment, Feng Rushue's figure swept into it and disappeared. Since last night until now, Xia Ji has spent almost 3,000 monthly tickets. He pushed his ranking to the 5th place in one fell swoop. I old you am really surprised and happy for Xia Ji. Chapter 1898. The 9 cauldrons floated in the air, and the laws of chaos flowed within them as they emanated an obscure and miraculous radiance. Lin Sun sat cross-legged at the center of the 9 cauldrons. His spirit, energy, and essence rumbled as his vital energy circulated. He was like a divine king that was tempering his cultivation. After attaining the Saint King realm, the divine Tao mountain within Lin Sun's black hole world had transformed into a divine altar that was 30 kilometers tall. This divine altar was condensed from the cultivation of a cultivator, and it was branded with various great Tao laws. It was also regarded as the divine altar of a Saint King. This was the most obvious transformation after attaining the Saint King realm. Lin Sun wasn't in a hurry to establish and condense his own Tao domain. He'd just overcome a peerless tribulation, and his strength had undergone a complete transformation. He needed to comprehend and stabilize his cultivation. A Saint King is called a king in the saint realm, and they're the leader of all saints. They're like tigers in the forest, capable of making all beasts revere and fear them. A supreme Saint King is different from an ordinary Saint King. The energy, laws, soul, and physique they control are 10 times or even 100 times stronger than an ordinary Saint King. With my current cultivation realm, just a little bit of my aura is enough to deter all saints. In the past, Lin Sun had killed many Saint Kings, and he was very clear about their resources and abilities. Now, when he compared it to the power that he controlled, he finally realized just how extraordinary the word absolute peak was in the Saint King realm. A supreme Saint King and a Saint King were both in the same realm, but the difference between them was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. For example, the divine altar of a Saint King within Lin Sun's body revealed a unique aura that was unique to the heavens. It was as if it was made of immortal gold, indestructible and indestructible. Not to mention an ordinary Saint King, even the divine altar of a supreme Saint King in the world would probably dim in comparison to Lin Sun. After all, Lin Sun had just broken through, and his cultivation was only at the early stage of a Saint King. But if he were to attack with his full strength, he could easily annihilate a Saint King who had attained the advanced stage of cultivation. For example, it was extremely difficult for him to approach the 9 cauldrons when he was at the peak of the great saint realm. But now, he could easily cultivate here. Rumble. As Lin Sun comprehended, he relied on the source energy of chaos to temper his body. Every breath he took caused the Tao to resound, and his entire body emitted a great might. From afar, Yu Yunhe and the other 2 felt like they were suffocating just by watching from afar. An instinctive fear arose in the depths of their hearts, as though they were ants looking up at a god in the heavens. At the same time, outside Emperor Yu's divine palace, the white-robed Feng Rushue stood in the air and looked around. A hint of surprise could not help but appear on her face. This expanse of the heavens and the earth seemed as if the end of the world had arrived. The mountains had collapsed, all living things had been annihilated, the ground had cracked apart, and signs of ruins had appeared everywhere. There were still traces of a shocking destructive aura lingering in the air. Is this really caused by the Saint King's tribulation, caused by a young man breaking through? Feng Rushue frowned. On the way here, He had already heard that a great calamity that affected the entire Du mystic realm had descended a few hours ago. The scene that appeared at that time could be said to be unimaginably terrifying and rarely seen in history. However, when Feng Rushua asked, no one dared to confirm the identity of the person undergoing the tribulation and whether or not he succeeded. Lin Daoyuan. Lin Daoyuan. Feng Rushua silently recited this name in his heart, and his expression became increasingly indifferent and cold. Now, the restrictive spells around the 9 Pinnacles mountain range had been destroyed, exposing the ancient and majestic Emperor Yu's celestial palace to the world. No matter who you are, you must die today. Feng Rushua's gaze was as sharp as a sword as he walked forward. From the moment he confirmed Li Yu's death, he could no longer control the murderous intent in his heart. Open. Thousands of feet away from Emperor Yu's celestial palace, Feng Rushua's imposing figure drew a line with his fingers, and a streak of sword qi shot up into the sky. The sword qi was snow-white, and with a slash, it was as if a galaxy had descended from the sky. Within the sword qi, ice and snow howled, and the sun and moon fluctuated. It was a shocking sight. Boom! When the sword qi pressed down, Emperor Yu's celestial palace surged with Dao runes, transforming into a restrictive force that blocked the stunning sword. The two collided and created an intense tremor. Damn it, someone actually attacked this place. Within Emperor Yu's celestial palace, Yu Yunhe and the rest were alarmed, and they all looked furious. This palace was left behind by the ancestor of the Yu clan. It was originally a place of opportunity prepared for the cultivators of the 9 great worlds, but now, someone actually wanted to destroy it. However, in the next moment, Yu Yunhe and the rest understood the reason. Outside the hall, an emotionless and cold voice was heard. Lin Daoyuan, come out and die. Every single word he spoke was like a peerless sword that possessed an awe-inspiring edge, and it caused others to shudder with fear. Yu Yunhe and the rest looked at each other with a serious expression. There was no need to guess. They knew that the person who dared to challenge them in such a domineering manner must be an important figure, and the purpose must be to take revenge for Qi Lingzi, Shui Biyun, and the other top figures of the 9 realms. After all, Lin Sun had suppressed them with one hand previously, and they were utterly defeated. Damn it, Brother Lin shouldn't have been merciful. Yu Yunhe gritted his teeth. Sigh, the situation was different then. If Lin Sun had not been merciful, the forces behind the prides of the 9 realms would have taken revenge on our Yu clan. Yu Yunfeng sighed softly. Haha, don't be nervous, you two. This Emperor Yu's celestial palace was left behind by our ancestor. It won't be easily broken. We just need to wait here. As Yu Yunlong spoke, he looked at Lin Sun in the distance and said in a low voice, when Brother Lin has completed his cultivation, who can stop you? Lin Daoyuan, if you hide and refuse to come out, then I'll definitely make it impossible for you to live or die once I break open this place. Feng Rushua's piercingly cold voice sounded again. So King noisy. Yu Yunhe was annoyed and scolded. Whoosh, a wave of restriction rolled, and even the sound of the outside world was isolated. They heard Lin Sun's voice, don't bother. When I come out of seclusion, I will take his head. His words were spoken in a casual manner. But in Yu Yunhe's ears, it sounded arrogant and domineering. They felt refreshed and inexplicably felt more at ease. In the outside world, Feng Rushua frowned. The restriction covering the celestial palace of Emperor Yu was too strong. He had already slashed 3 times, but he could only shake it and not break it. As expected of the treasured land left behind by Emperor Yu, Feng Rushua sighed in his heart. Even though the methods of the Emperor realm had been worn down by time, it was not something a peak sage king like him could break. Brother Feng. Right at this moment, a wave of spatial fluctuation arose like tidewater, and then numerous figures appeared successively here. They were the important figures of the 9 realms who had gathered in the main hall of the Star Sword Pavilion. The leader was the green-robed elder of the Star Sword Pavilion. You guys are here too. Feng Rushue glanced at them and his expression became calm again. Brother Feng, is that Lin murderer hiding in there? The green-robed elder looked at the celestial palace of Emperor Yu. His name was Li Po, a sage king in the Perfection realm. He had been famous in the Great Yu realm for a long time and was only one step away from becoming an emperor. However, compared to Feng Rushue, who was an apex saint king, a saint king like him who had yet to reach the apex was slightly inferior. That's right. Feng Rushue nodded. The green-robed elder Li Po said with a solemn expression, On our way here, we heard that this boy seems to have triggered a shocking Sage King tribulation. If he is still alive, I'm afraid he has already stepped into the Sage King realm and is completely different from before. The expressions of the others were also uncertain. They had come here because they suspected that Lin Daoyuan was the Lin Sun, who was rumored to be wanted by the world. But they did not expect to hear the news of this peerless tribulation as soon as they arrived. All of them were slightly surprised by this. So what if he has broken through? He is just a young man who has stepped into the Sage King realm for the first time. It is easy to kill him while his realm is not stable. Feng Rushue's expression was cold. His figure was like a sword and his clothes were whiter than snow. All of us here are Sage Kings. Brother Feng, Brother Qi, and Brother Shui are all peak Sage Kings. With our combined strength, it is indeed not difficult to kill such a young man. The green-robed elder Li Po said, But before that, there is one thing I need to tell Brother Feng. Oh! Feng Rushue raised his brows. This boy is most likely Lin Sun. Li Po said in a low voice. Lin Sun. The aura around Feng Rushue suddenly roared. His black hair fluttered and his eyes were suffused with a terrifying divine light. With his status, how could he not have heard of Lin Sun? Then, Feng Rushue understood and glanced at Li Po and the rest. So, you are not here for revenge. Everyone smiled without saying anything. That was easy to guess. If it was just to deal with an ordinary person, it would not be enough for them to take action personally. Naturally, Lin Sun was not an ordinary person. He was involved in many secrets of the Kunlun ruins and had the fortune to become an emperor or ancestor. Not to mention them, even an emperor-stage existence would be tempted. Li Po stroked his beard and said, Of course, we are only suspecting now. We do not dare to confirm if this boy is Lin Sun. But this is no longer important. As long as we capture him, we will find out the answer. Feng Rushue looked at Emperor Yu's divine palace from afar and said, I don't care about this. Li Yu is dead. No matter who this boy is, he must atone for his crimes with his death. In the distance, Qi Lingzi, Shui Biun, Lai Dongzhan and the other juniors had also arrived. They listened silently to the plans of these big shots with different expressions. Previously, they were defeated by Lin Sun and suffered the hatred of being robbed. This was a great shame to them. Now that these big shots had appeared to support them, of course, they were extremely excited. I don't care if you are Lin Daoyuan or Lin Sun. This time, let's see how long you can jump around. Qi Lingzi and the others sneered secretly, all of them looking forward to it. Between heaven and earth, a group of kings gathered, the weather changed, and the area was filled with killing intent. The slaughter was coming. At this moment, in Emperor Yu's divine palace, the 9 cauldrons roared and the chaotic aura covered Lin Sun's body like a tide. His expression was calm, ethereal and calm, as if he was unaware of the movements in the outside world. Chapter 1899. Time passed quickly, and 3 days had passed. Feng Rushue, Li Po, and the others waited patiently without any signs of impatience. At their realm, their state of mind and willpower were already extremely strong, so they naturally wouldn't be impatient because of waiting. Not to mention, if they really confirmed that Lin Daoyuan was Lin Sun, then it would be equivalent to waiting for a supreme fortune that could attract the attention of the entire starry sky ancient path. In the face of such a fortune, no one would be unwilling to wait. In these 3 days, the Diu's secret realm wasn't peaceful either. Many cultivators had heard that the group of kings had set out and sealed off the area around the 9 Pinnacles mountain. And Lin Daoyuan had become the target of public criticism. This young man, who had never been famous before, had defeated Qi Lingzi, Shui Biyun, and the others. Now, he had become the most famous man in the Great Yu realm. But it was very obvious that the tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. A great calamity had already come for him. Boom! In the Diu's secret realm, the 9 Pinnacles mountain trembled. How terrifying was Lin Sun's power when he cultivated. The surging power of the source of chaos surged into his body like a river, scouring his limbs and bones, inside and out of his body. In the end, a divine altar appeared above his head, and it was as dazzling as the sun. It contained various great Tao laws, and it actually gave others an unparalleled scene of immortality and eternity. At this point, Lin Sun's cultivation as a saint king had been completely stabilized. His body was crystal clear, and every inch of his pores flowed with mysterious Tao light. His pure vital energy flowed like a beacon, and his bones and tendons were like they were made of divine gold, dazzling and bright. Just the strength of his body was comparable to the most powerful divine weapons in the world. His soul resided in his mind and nurtured his body. Every single drop of his blood was like a peerless divine medicine that was filled with copious vitality. And his cultivation was like a big furnace. Surging pure green saint origin energy circulated between the chaotic whole acupoints, and it was so dense that it almost couldn't be dispersed. The 3 paths of body refinement, soul refinement, and qi refinement combined into one, and only the essence was one. However, Lin Sun encountered a great problem when he was establishing and condensing the Tao domain. His quintessent spirit vein was the grand abyss devouring sky. The foundation of his Tao was the star obliteration sky devouring Tao, yet the Tao art he created was the furnace of the grand Tao instead. If he were to condense the Tao realm, he would have to choose his own Tao as the source of energy. But what troubled Lin Sun was how to make his Tao realm attain a state of unprecedented and unique in the heavens. It was very difficult. The 9 cauldrons formed from the Chaos Origins laws allowed Lin Sun to forge an embryonic Tao domain. It was like a furnace but not a furnace, like an abyss but not an abyss. It presented a state of chaos. But how to perfect and condense a complete Tao field became a difficult problem for Lin Sun. A Tao domain was like a world, condensed from one's Tao attainment. In this world, every sage king's Tao domain was different. Their quality and power also varied greatly. If he wanted to use his Tao domain to stand above the world in terms of quality and strength, to reach a state where he stood at the peak of the domain, it was undoubtedly very difficult. Never mind. In any case, I've already tempered the embryonic form of my Tao domain. In the future, I'll naturally be able to form it when I overcome the knot in my heart. Lin Sun opened his eyes. Boom! As he stood up, a terrifying power that made one's heart tremble was released, causing the 9 cauldrons formed from the Chaos Origins to tremble violently. He's awake! Oh my God! What a terrifying power! Almost immediately, Yu Yunhe and the others were shocked. Looking from afar, they saw Lin Sun standing in the void, surrounded by the 9 cauldrons. His figure emitted a dazzling light of Tao. He was like a legendary divine king descending to the world with unparalleled elegance. The power that was released inadvertently made Yu Yunhe and the others have the palpitations of kneeling on the ground in worship. They especially felt a sense of insignificance. Was this the power of Sage King Jueshu? Lin Sun glanced at them and floated down from the void. As he breathed, his body was like rivers flowing into the sea. He restrained all his aura, and his entire figure became plain and ethereal. If he was said to be like the ancient vault of heaven before, standing above the world, then he was like an ordinary person now. Divine objects concealed themselves, just like returning to their natural state. So did people. This made Yu Yunhe and the others stunned. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, who would dare to believe that this ordinary young man in front of them was a sage king who had passed through a great tribulation? Congratulations, Brother Lin. Yu Yunhe smiled and cupped his hands. Although Lin Sun's aura was restrained, Yu Yunhe still felt a sense of oppression and awe. It was like facing a tiger without its claws and teeth. What are you congratulating me for? There's a killing tribulation waiting for me outside this hall, Lin Sun said indifferently. At the mention of this, Yu Yunhe and the other two's hearts thumped. You can stay here and watch the battle. Lin Sun put his hands behind his back and walked out of the hall. At this moment, a wisp of yearning that couldn't be restrained surged into his heart, and he wanted to test exactly how formidable his current strength was. As for how many opponents there were outside, Lin Sun no longer cared. He, who had stepped into the Sage King realm, was completely different from before. Even if an emperor-to-be came, he would dare to fight with him. In the sky above the 9 Pinnacles mountain range, Feng Rushue sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. A dull ancient sword lay in front of him, motionless like an old monk in meditation. Li Po, the elder of the Star Sword Pavilion, and the others were discussing matters in low voices. Now, all news in the Diu secret realm has been blocked. I believe that no one will know what happened here in a short period of time. Li Po said leisurely. Everyone knows that if this lad is really Lin Sun, when we take away his good fortune and the news spreads, it will definitely bring us an unexpected disaster. That's right, this is a crime because of a treasure. You are very wise. The others nodded. They were also worried that once the news was leaked, some reclusive old antiques would definitely fight for it. What's the reaction from the Imperial Yu clan? Someone asked with a frown. What else can they do? The Yu clan is the wisest. If they dare to protect this lad, I'm afraid the big forces behind you will see the Yu clan as a target. Li Po laughed, very conceited. At this moment, the restrictive power that enveloped Emperor Yu's celestial palace in the distance suddenly produced a ripple-like fluctuation. Although the movement was subtle, Li Po and the others noticed it immediately. Swoosh! Feng Rushue, who was sitting in the air with his sword across his knees, opened his eyes. In their vision, a tall figure walked out of Emperor Yu's celestial palace with his hands behind his back. He's out. Ha! He finally can't take it anymore. The restrictive power of Emperor Yu's celestial palace has lost the support of the power contained in the 9 Pinnacles mountain. It won't take long for it to dissipate. He's smart. He knows that he'll die if he drags on. Suddenly, the crowd was in an uproar. The Sage King realm bigwigs locked their eyes on Lin Sun. They were all eager to make a move. In their eyes, Lin Sun was an extremely tempting good fortune. Meanwhile, Qi Lingzi, Shui Biun, and the others were all in high spirits, all of them excited. That damnable bastard had finally shown himself. Lin Sun, you've finally come out, Li Po said in a low voice. His voice was like thunder, reverberating in the surroundings. Lin Sun? Lin Sun glanced at the crowd in the distance. Haha, so you suspect my identity and see me as a treasure. No wonder so many people have gathered here. Li Po frowned. The reason why he suddenly shouted the name Lin Sun was to catch Lin Sun off guard and see his reaction. He didn't expect Lin Sun to be so calm and composed. Lin Sun, you're already at death's door. Can't you see the situation? Qi Lingzi couldn't help but shout. Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep. He said indifferently, I only know that you have to thank me for not killing you. But it seems that you don't appreciate it. In that case, I'll send you all to hell. You, Qi Lingzi, Shui Biun, and the others were so angry that they laughed. It was as if they had heard the most absurd joke in the world. How could this guy still threaten them at such a time? Li Po's eyes were filled with a terrible divine light. He said with a dignified expression, Young man, I only ask you, are you Lin Sun? Every word was like thunder, directly striking people's hearts. So what if I am? So what if I'm not? Lin Sun raised the corner of his mouth coldly. In that case, I also want to ask you, who will come to die first? How dare you? A short and fat old man in a yellow robe shouted and clapped his hand in the void. Boom! A huge yellow palm as big as a mountain condensed, intertwined with the law, and released the mountain-like power of the field domain. How could it be ordinary for a saint king to make a move? Moreover, none of the big shots present was ordinary. They were either old monsters who had been immersed in this realm for countless years and had long reached the completion, or saint kings who had set foot on the top of the realm. Their combat power and power were even more terrible. For example, as soon as the short and fat old man in a yellow robe made a move, he had the great power to suppress the universe and kill all living beings in his palm. However, Lin Sun didn't even look at it. He put his left hand behind his back and flicked the fingers of his right hand gently. The giant yellow palm coming from the sky, like a punctured ball, burst in an instant with a roar. Whoosh! At the same time, Lin Sun's figure disappeared into thin air. The next moment, he appeared in front of the short and fat old man in a yellow robe and pressed his palm out. His palm was slender, fair and crystal clear, without a trace of worldly aura. But as the palm came down, it made the short and fat old man stiffen all over. His eyes seemed to be covered by a sky curtain, and he felt suffocated. Open! He was almost at a loss. He roared and waved his fist. His sleeves fluttered, and his fist force burst forth, condensing into the power of the field of Tao to fight head-on. Bang! When the palm and fist collided, the short and fat old man's fist force was crushed like paper. His sleeves were torn and flew around like butterflies. His fist, wrist, and even his entire arm exploded inch by inch, and blood and flesh splattered. Boom! In the end, his body was unable to withstand the power of this palm, and he was sent flying through the air, exploding violently. Blood rained down. Chapter 1900. He killed a saint king with one palm. All the kings present were shocked and their expressions changed. The short and fat yellow-robed old man was a saint king in the Baihao major world. His status and combat power were first class in the same realm. But he was killed in a snap of a finger. From the beginning to the end, Lin Sun was calm and composed. Even when he attacked, there was not a trace of smoke and fire in his body. How is this possible? Someone cried out. When I was in the great saint realm, I could cross a realm and kill a saint king. Now that I'm in the same realm as you, it's easy for me to kill you. Why is it impossible? Lin Sun said calmly. He stood in the void, his aura calm and ethereal. Arrogant! A thin man in a black robe snorted coldly and attacked with his spear. Boom! The shadow of the spear flickered and turned into a Tao domain that suddenly covered the sky. Lightning flashed and thunder roared in the domain. Black fog rolled and thousands of phantoms of gods and demons appeared, roaring and rushing over. Tao domain, 3,000 gods and demons. Lin Sun's black eyes were indifferent, without sadness or joy. He drew a line with his fingers and a sword chi swept out. It was fierce and domineering. Chi. The Tao domain that was intertwined with terrifying laws was torn apart by the sword chi like a piece of cloth. The sword chi swept across, and wherever it passed, the phantoms of gods and demons were all cut down. The void was broken by the sword, and the world was shaken. Only the sword chi was as vast as the sun. Puff! The thin man in a black robe coughed up blood and staggered back. He was injured by the sword chi. His chest was torn open with a deep wound, and his stomach was almost cut open. Seeing this scene, elderly Po and the others all changed their expressions. Even Feng Rushue and the other saint kings frowned and showed a trace of seriousness. The combat power of the man in a black robe was not inferior to some of the saint kings present, but Lin Sun's Tao domain was broken by the sword and caused a sword injury. How can he be so powerful? Some big shots were surprised and hesitated. If they treated Lin Sun as a junior when they came, then now Lin Sun was equivalent to them in the same realm, and in terms of combat power, he had an absolute advantage. He has already stepped into the peak Saint King realm. Feng Rushua spoke. His voice was piercingly cold like the wind as it drifted in the air. His white clothes fluttered while a dim and ancient sword floated before him, and his entire body suddenly emanated shocking sword insight that surged through the surroundings. His words caused the entire crowd to tremble. If the Saint King realm was crowned with the words absolute peak, then the meaning behind it would be completely different. No one expected that a young man like Lin Sun had made such extraordinary achievements on the road of Tao. Boom! Just when everyone was in doubt, Lin Sun had started selling again. He punched out gently. The punch was simple and unadorned, but it was as powerful as an ancient divine mountain. Boundless space collapsed in the face of the punch, and a crack appeared in the sky. It was headed straight for a gray-robed elder. At this moment, the fist was like a divine mountain, rumbling like thunder, its power unparalleled. Humph! The gray-robed elder snorted coldly, and his body suddenly turned into an ape of thousands of meters high. His whole body was covered with black and blue brilliance, and his chi and blood were rolling like smoke, spreading in all directions and condensing into a Tao field. Body refining Saint King. Moreover, the condensed Tao field was like a bloody purgatory, which was poured by the surging law of Tao and the power of chi and blood. It reflected the ferocious scene of white bones and blood flowing like a sea. Vaguely, there were even shrill cries of ghosts and gods drifting out. Such a Tao domain had obviously attained an extremely profound state, and it was like a true world. And the black-blue giant ape transformed by the gray-robed elder was like the lord of the world, sitting on the white bone mountain and controlling the bloody sea. Boom! Lin Sun's punch was quickly crushed and obliterated by the power of white bones, blood river, demons and so on, producing a deafening roar and a rain of light. What peerless Saint King! I have just set foot in this realm, and my cultivation is not stable. What's there to be afraid of? The black-blue giant ape sneered, stepping on the white bone and the blood sea. His whole body was surging with terrible power. Really? Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep and he punched again. It was the same simple punch, but compared with the previous one, it carried a shocking momentum, pulling all kinds of mysteries of Tao and roaring out. It was just a punch, but it gave people the feeling that it was accompanied by the Tao of heaven, deducing all kinds of methods. What a strong aura! The black-blue giant ape's eyes narrowed, and with a roar, he waved a giant white bone stick and rushed to Lin Sun. As he moved, the purgatory-like bloody world also moved, and black fog emerged. Boom! The two collided, the world trembled, and the sun and moon lost their light. In the smoke and dust, the black-blue giant ape, who was thousands of feet tall, stood in the void with a look of disbelief. His voice was hoarse with a sense of loss. How can he be so strong? Before he could finish speaking, his 10,000-meter-tall body exploded into pieces. Lin Sun's punch not only destroyed his Tao domain, but also shattered his body. The fist force was like a raging thunderstorm, crushing his soul, internal organs, tendons, bones, flesh, skin, all of them, turning them into a rain of blood. In the end, even the splattering rain of blood was blown away by the fist force, completely evaporating in the void. A body-refining holy king could be reborn with a drop of blood, but it was obvious that the gray-robed old man, who had turned into a giant ape, had no possibility of resurrection. With a single punch, another Saint King was killed. The audience was shocked. At this point, in just a moment, the short and fat yellow-robed old man was killed by a palm, and then the black-robed man was seriously injured by a sword. At this time, a body-refining holy king like the black-robed old man was killed by a punch. A palm, a sword, a punch, every confrontation ended with irresistible force, and the battle ended in a snap of the fingers. Looking at Lin Sun again, he stood in the void, his clothes fluttering, like a legendary banished immortal, spotless and unscathed. Is there anyone else who wants to die? Lin Sun's voice was calm as he scanned the audience, and the expressions of those big shots were uncertain. As for Qi Lingzi, Shui Biyun, and the other young people, they had long been stunned. Compared to a few days ago, the current Lin Sun had already reached an unimaginable level. I'll do it! Feng Rushua floated out, his expression indifferent, and his clothes were whiter than snow. Everyone's spirits were lifted. Feng Rushua, a peerless holy king, was also a sword king with unparalleled combat power. With him taking action, the outcome would be decided. Speaking of which, although this group of people came together, they came from the 9 great worlds after all. They belonged to different camps, and they all had different thoughts. Just like just now, when Lin Sun attacked, even though he killed 2 big shots, to them, they were just shocked and amazed by Lin Sun's combat power, and they had no intention of taking action from beginning to end. Clang! The sword hummed like a tide. The dull ancient sword rang in front of Feng Rushua, as if thirsting for blood. Feng Rushua's aura also changed at this moment. His white clothes were like an immortal, and his sword intent was like a god. Standing there, he released a terrible power, which made other big shots feel suffocated and extremely depressed. The clouds in the sky collapsed, and the void wailed as if bowing to him. Lin Sun's black eyes brightened, and he sighed with emotion. Finally, there is a worthy opponent. I hope you won't let me down. Just one sentence enraged everyone here. This person was truly arrogant. Who was Feng Rushua? How could he think of him as someone worthy of a fight? If that's the case, then what are they? Didn't he want to see? Disappointed? No, you must die. Feng Rushua was calm and his white hair was flying. His momentum became more and more fierce, like a divine sword hanging in the sky, its light shining on the mountains and rivers. Whoosh! He waved his sleeve, and the dull ancient sword in front of him swept out. Suddenly, the world seemed to be unable to bear the power of this sword and burst into pieces. The unparalleled sword Qi, wrapped in pure and condensed power to the extreme, whistled. Boom! The mountains and rivers were shaking, and all the big shots present gasped. This was the demeanor of an ultimate saint king. It was unimaginably powerful. Not bad, not bad. You are qualified to be my whetstone. While laughing, Lin Sun faced the attack. He stretched out his figure, and his spirit burst out like a silent copper furnace in a chaotic world. A terrifying wave that no one could imagine burst out from Lin Sun, as if it was going to collapse the heavens. The entire 9 Pinnacles mountain trembled, and all the creatures within 1,000 miles trembled and prostrated themselves on the ground. This guy has really become an ultimate saint king. There was a commotion in the field, and everyone was shocked. Lin Sun was plain and ethereal like a banished immortal before. But at this moment, when he really operated his strength, the power seemed to cover the sky and the sun. Boom! As early as when everyone was trembling, Lin Sun had already punched out and collided with the dull ancient sword. The fist and the sword collided, producing a vibration like the sound of metal clashing. Unparalleled Taoist light splashed, and turbulent waves spread in all directions. Feng Rushua frowned slightly. This sword actually failed to hurt Lin Sun. However, Lin Sun's figure paused for a moment, and then he attacked again. When the time comes, heaven and earth are together. Feng Rushua's expression was calm and solemn. He controlled the dull ancient sword and demonstrated his own swordsmanship. The sword Qi was vigorous, drawing the power of heaven and earth to the tip of the sword. Each sword had the power to kill ghosts and gods, and overturn the universe. It was sharp and powerful to the extreme. Looking from afar, it was like a peerless sword god was fighting in the sky. That kind of demeanor amazed everyone present. The ultimate saint king controlled all Taoism, and the power of his sword was incomparable to ordinary people. However, to everyone's surprise, under Feng Rushue's attack, Lin Sun was not at a disadvantage at all. His figure glowed, and his body flowed with Taoist light. He walked disdainfully and did not retreat or dodge at all. He raised his fist and attacked head-on. In the blink of an eye, the two had fought hundreds of rounds, from the sky to the ground, teleporting and flashing for 8,000 miles. They fought until the sky was dark, sand and stones were flying, and thousands of miles of mountains and rivers were destroyed. The unparalleled duels made all the big shots present feel emotional and couldn't calm down. No one expected that Lin Sun, a young man who had just stepped into the Saint King realm, could compete with Feng Rushue, a legendary giant of Sword Tao. This was completely unexpected. Chapter 1901 / The dull ancient sword swept violently, ignoring the space, killing like lightning and peerless sharpness. After fighting for a long time, Feng Rushue's expression became more and more solemn. His white clothes were fluttering, and he regarded Lin Sun as a formidable enemy in his life. His sword intent was mighty. In terms of combat power alone, he was indeed the strongest opponent Lin Sun had encountered in these years. His person was like his sword, sharp, pure, and without any superfluous words. If Lin Sun had not broken through the realm, even if he could block such an attack, he would inevitably feel very tired. After all, this was a real peerless Saint King, and his cultivation had reached an extremely high level, far from ordinary people. But for the current Lin Sun, although Feng Rushue's combat power was strong, it was not much of a threat. Boom! He wantonly waved his fists and performed his own method. His body was like a chaotic Taoist furnace, but it reflected the image of a big abyss swallowing the sky. He moved across the void and defeated all attacks with unstoppable momentum. In the end of the fierce battle, Lin Sun suddenly let out a laugh. "If this is all, you will be defeated in less than 10 breaths." His sonorous voice stirred the 9 heavens and 10 earths. All the heroes were surprised. Where did this man get his confidence from? How dare he boast so shamelessly? But Feng Rushue was silent for a moment. His figure suddenly stopped in the void, and then he took a deep breath. His eyes were bright, surging with hundreds of millions of sword chi. Sword domain, lifeless. Boom! Above the void, Feng Rushue's figure released a tide of sword intent, which suddenly spread and evolved into a vast and solemn sword domain. Sword was like Tao, Tao was like domain, and there was no life in the domain. In an instant, everyone felt a stabbing pain in front of their eyes, and their minds were shocked by the terrible sword chi, making their hair stand on end. Lifeless sword domain. This was the Tao domain that Feng Rushue had honed for 3,000 years with supreme sword will. It was like a world of swords, branded with his unique skills. Lin Sun once asked Green Sun Saber Emperor how to break the stalemate between 2 Saint Kings with Tao domain. Green Sun Saber Emperor's answer was only one sentence: "The battle of Tao domain is like the battle of Tao. The strong live and the weak die." Feng Rushue's lifeless sword domain was very strong. It covered Lin Sun in an instant and suppressed him. Boom! The unparalleled sword chi intertwined into the power of the Great Way like the order of the world, suppressing Lin Sun from all directions with the momentum of wind and rain. The mountains and rivers, the plants, the sky, the shadows, the void, all of them were sword intents, all of them were killing intent. Lifeless under the sword was the lifeless sword field. At this moment, Lin Sun felt a heavy pressure, but he wasn't alarmed. Instead, he was delighted, and a smile appeared on his face. What he longed for was precisely a confrontation of strength like this. Dong! He took a deep breath and punched. The might of his fist was like an abyss, vast, boundless, and capable of seizing the fortune of the heavens and the earth. All sorts of grand daos fluctuated, and they emanated an obscure fluctuation that caused one's heart to palpitate. At this moment, the whistling sword chi from all directions seemed to be pulled by a terrible devouring force. All of them buzzed and then exploded under Lin Sun's punch. The rolling rain of light fluttered about, magnificent and dazzling. Kill! Feng Rushue's pupils constricted, and he circulated his full strength without hesitation. The lifeless sword field was his proudest means of killing. Over the years with this sword field, he had slaughtered hundreds of opponents, including some who were at the peak of the Saint King realm. But now, a young man who had just set foot on the peak of the Saint King realm was trapped in the sword field, but he still had the power to fight back. This was something he had never encountered before, and it also made him realize that this opponent couldn't be underestimated at all. He must be regarded as a formidable enemy. Boom! The sword field operated like a roaring world. The unparalleled sword intents were controlled by Feng Rushue, turning into sword rain, sword river, sword mountain, sword forest. They rushed to Lin Sun with overwhelming force. How terrible was it to suppress one person with the power of a world? Although the sword field was not a real world, being trapped in it was no different from being trapped in a world. Break! 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 Lin Sun waved his fist. Every blow was like the emergence of a great abyss, swallowing everything in all directions, grinding and refining all the rolling sword intents. In the end, the layer upon layer of fist strikes transformed into layer upon layer of intersecting images of abysses, and they grew more and more material and stable as if they really existed. They lay across the sword domain and rumbled as they revolved, causing this world of swords to start warping, trembling, and shaking. This Feng Rushue's incomparably tenacious state of mind also produced stormy waves at this moment. He had been used to seeing life and death and experiencing the storms of the world, but it was the first time that he had encountered such an incredibly powerful opponent. Lin Sun was obviously trapped in his sword field, but he had the power to overturn his sword field. Feng Rushue took a deep breath and looked unprecedentedly solemn. He fought with all his might. His whole body was shining like a sword, dominating the ups and downs of the sword field. However, all the counterattacks seemed to be in vain. Break! When Lin Sun punched the 8th time, the great abyss stretched across as if it was eternally motionless. It swallowed everything and broke everything, which made Lin Sun invincible. When Lin Sun punched the 9th time, the entire lifeless sword field began to tumble violently. It was disturbed by the power released by the great abyss, and the world was overturned and turbulent. Feng Rushue's face was pale, and his lips were bleeding. This was his sword field. When the power of the sword field was hit hard, he was also injured. At this moment, Lin Sun was already immersed in this hardy tempering. Through the method of fighting and killing, he completely grasped the power of a peak Saint King that belonged to him. He could control it as if it was his own arm, and he could control it as he pleased. Break! When Lin Sun punched the 10th time, the substantial abyss suddenly shrank and condensed in his fist. The power in the sword field seemed to be drained, producing a sense of dryness and emptiness. Then, as Lin Sun punched out, the lifeless sword field, which Feng Rushue was proud of, burst into pieces like an overburdened glass. At this moment, like a destructive volcanic eruption, the power of the great way derived from the sword field all collapsed and turned into an unparalleled torrent, sweeping in all directions. The lifeless sword field was forced? It's impossible! God, all the people in the field were shocked and couldn't believe it. Above the sky, it was like the end of the world. The divine light swept across and the sound of Tao shook the sky. Feng Rushue staggered. His snow-white clothes were stained with blood, and his hair was disheveled. He looked extremely embarrassed and no longer had the incomparable demeanor before. The most horrifying thing was that on his chest there was a fist mark deep in the flesh. On the other hand, Lin Sun stood in the void, his black hair fluttering, and his tall figure was like the sky, giving people an unshakable feeling. The whole field was silent. The lifeless sword field was destroyed, and he couldn't kill his opponent. This was undoubtedly too terrible. It turns out that there is such a great way in this world, Feng Ruxiu murmured, and his eyes were in a trance. He thought that he had seen the scenery of the Saint King realm in this life, but today he found that he was just a frog in a well. Boom! The next moment, Feng Ruxiu's figure was torn apart in the void, turned into a rain of light, and disappeared. Lin Sun's previous punch not only destroyed his lifeless sword field, but also shattered his heart meridian and soul, cutting off his vitality. It was also this punch that made Feng Ruxiu realize that there was such an incredible scene in the Saint King realm before he died. At this point, Feng Ruxiu, the Saint King of the Sword, a giant figure on the path of the Saint King realm, was killed by Lin Sun on the spot. Lin Sun's power shocked the whole field. The smoke of the battle was still spreading, but the field was dead silent. Every big shot's face was full of horror. What a dazzling and powerful Saint King Feng Ruxiu was actually defeated by a young man who had just set foot in this realm. You all come together. Lin Sun stood in the void and glanced at the crowd with his black eyes. His words made the faces of those big shots become gloomy again. They looked at each other, and finally, with a flash of ruthlessness in their eyes, they attacked with all their strength. Although Feng Ruxiu was dead, they still had 2 Saint Kings and a group of old monsters in the Saint King realm. If they gave up like this, how could they be willing? Boom! The world trembled, and the sun and moon lost their light. A group of old monsters attacked with all their strength, urging their own strength to the extreme. Among them, the 2 Saint Kings were the most dazzling. One was a man in a red robe, with a devilish red fire pattern on his eyebrows. The other was a graceful woman in a gorgeous robe, with smooth skin and jade-like bones, holding a round and translucent ice wheel. In terms of combat power, the 2 were roughly the same as Feng Ruxiu. With the 2 of them and the support of a group of old monsters in the Saint King realm, this lineup was undoubtedly very powerful. In the whole Yu world, they could run amok. Kill! Tut! Rise! Suppress! Amidst the bursts of roars, layers of Tao domains appeared in the world. They were all incomparably mysterious, revealing different phenomena. Some were like a vast ocean, covering the sky and the earth. Some were like a country of molten lava, with flames flowing, burning the sky and destroying the earth. Some turned into a greenwood realm, with vines growing and ancient trees towering into the sky. In addition to displaying the Tao domains, these old monsters also took out their treasures, which were overflowing with light and dazzling, whistling between heaven and earth. That scene was enough to make all living beings in the world tremble in fear. However, Lin Sun turned a blind eye to it. He stepped into the void, and the sound of Tao rumbled and surged around his body. Like a furnace of the Great Way, he carried out a massacre. Swish! The snow-white broken blade swept out, swift like lightning, flashing and disappearing without a trace. Clang! Clang! The Avicii and Yuantu swords were controlled by Lin Sun. One was like a pitch-black prison, and the other was like a blood river in the netherworld. The sword chi surged and was unstoppable. At this moment, Lin Sun no longer held back. Rumble! The battle broke out. Lin Sun's figure was like lightning, shuttling through the void. Wherever the sword pointed, it broke through the layers of Tao domains, as if it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Poof! And where his figure passed, 3 king saints were killed on the spot. One had his forehead split open by the broken blade, and his soul exploded. One had his throat pierced by the Avicii sword, and his body was annihilated by the terrifying sword chi. One was drowned by the blood river formed by the Yuantu sword, and his corpse melted like snow, and these bloody scenes of death happened in just a snap of a finger. Chapter 1902. Fresh blood dyed the sky red. The Battle of the Kings caused the rules and powers that covered the entire Yu mystery realm to be impacted and destroyed. The doomsday-like scene made the hearts of many cultivators in different areas of the mystery realm tremble. They chose to escape and leave without hesitation. There were also many who were not afraid of death watching. After all, a battle of this scale was rare even in the DU world. It might not be seen even once in tens of thousands of years. The killing was boiling. The big shots from the 9 great worlds all seemed to have gone mad. They were like angry gods, their divine might shocking the world. In contrast, Lin Sun, who was fighting alone, seemed to be besieged. However, in reality, the 2 peerless Saint Kings and the other King Saints could not suppress his attack at all. In just a short moment, 5 Saint Kings had been killed. This was a number that could cause the hearts of the world to tremble. A Saint King was like a pillar of support to any great force in the world, and every single loss of one was an extremely heavy blow and loss. At this moment, King Saints died like rain. Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of this. He was immersed in the battle and comprehended the various wonders of the peerless Saint King. Even though he had only condensed the embryonic form of the realm of Tao, the combat power that he possessed now was far above that of ordinary King Saints. Even Feng Ruxue, a peerless Saint King, paled in comparison. In the final analysis, it was because the path and combat power that he controlled could be said to be the only one in the world. Poof! With a flash of cold light, a bloody head was tossed into the air. Another saint ruler had been slain by the broken blade. Lin Sun did not even look at it. His figure flashed, and he charged towards another person. His expression was neither sad nor happy. His eyes were deep, reflecting all the phenomena in the world. His killing intent was like the wind, and his power was like that of a god. Clang! The red-robed man with a bright red fire pattern between his eyebrows attacked. He held a saber in his hand and blocked Lin Sun's attack. However, he did not have it easy either. His chi and blood were tumbling. On the other side, the graceful woman in a luxurious robe controlled the divine wheel. It rotated and rumbled as she attacked Lin Sun. The combat power of the 2 peerless Saint Kings was naturally extraordinary. Under their joint attack, Lin Sun's attack was also hindered. If not for that, all the other Saint Kings present would have been killed a long time ago. A Tao domain is ever-changing, but its quality and strength are obvious at a glance. In the battle, Lin Sun had a sudden enlightenment. After attaining the peak eminent sage realm, the profundities he saw through when he observed the Tao domains of others were different, and it also made his knowledge and understanding of the Tao domain deeper. These experiences were all turned into a kind of understanding and accumulated in Lin Sun's mind, which would be of great benefit to him in condensing the Tao field in the future. In this realm, I am only at the early stage of cultivation. However, because of the cultivation and power I possess, I am far above those in the same realm. That is why I can kill them like slaughtering chickens and monkeys. Unfortunately, it's not strong enough. If I were to condense my Tao domain to perfection, I should be invincible in this realm. I wonder what kind of cultivation level the people on the All Heavens King Sage board possess, and how powerful are their Tao domains. While Lin Sun was immersed in his thoughts, the battle in the field became more and more intense. In particular, the man in a red robe and the woman in a luxurious robe repeatedly blocked and attacked him, which made him rather impatient. This was a peak eminent sage king. If it was a one-on-one battle, Lin Sun was absolutely confident that he could end the battle quickly. However, in such a large-scale chaotic battle, he would be restrained and affected by many forces, so it was another matter. Lin Sun did not think too much, got rid of all distracting thoughts, and moved his mind. Boom! Impassioned Tao sounds were produced around him, and a vast and boundless light bloomed. A rudimentary Tao domain appeared behind him, covering the entire sky. Damn it, my power has been completely suppressed? In an instant, the man in a red robe's expression changed drastically. What kind of Tao domain is this? The aura it produces is too terrifying. At the same time, the woman in a luxurious robe's heart also trembled. Her body stiffened, and her strength was fiercely suppressed by an invisible great power. As for the other Saint Kings present, they were even more unbearable. They staggered and almost lost their balance. The chi all over their bodies felt sluggish, and they were powerless, as if they were heavily shackled and shackled. What kind of power is this? They were shocked. In the distant void, Lin Sun's figure was shrouded in chaotic chi, obscure and indistinct. And above his head, a Tao domain appeared. It was like a furnace but not a furnace, like an abyss but not an abyss. It was deep and indescribable like the Great Way. It was clearly just a rudimentary form, but when this Tao domain appeared, everyone felt as if they had fallen into an abyss. They felt powerless, as if they were in a chaotic furnace, being tormented and refined. Of course, this was only a kind of mental oppression, but even so, it made the big shots present feel inexplicably horrified. It was just a rudimentary form, but it was already so terrifying. How shocking would it be when it took form? You are very lucky to be able to see my Tao domain. You can rest in peace. When Lin Sun spoke, there was a rumble, and the man in a red robe who was closest to him was instantly dragged into Lin Sun's Tao domain. At this moment, he felt as if he had fallen into a boundless abyss. His surroundings were empty and boundless. He kept falling, powerless to struggle, powerless to change. An indescribable fear surged in his heart. The man in a red robe could not help but shout, "Fellow Taoist, I admit defeat. Please let me go. It's too late." It was just two words that came out of Lin Sun's mouth, and it was like a decree from the heavens. Pooh! The abyss suddenly shrank, and it produced a copious and irresistible devouring force that instantly enveloped the man in a red robe. The essence, energy, and spirit in his body were instantly sucked out at a speed visible to the naked eye. His body cracked and shriveled, his blood and chi dimmed, and his vitality weakened. The Sage King Divine platform, that gathered all his cultivation within his body, cracked inch by inch before transforming into powder that scattered in the air. In the blink of an eye, he was reduced to ashes. At the same time, Lin Sun couldn't help but have a strange feeling in his heart. He sensed a scorching and boiling torrent of the great Tao surging into his body along the Tao domain. The torrent was filled with fragmented fragments of the laws of the great Tao. They were chaotic and disorderly, and they were all the profundities of the great Tao that the man in a red robe had comprehended on his path of cultivation. Lin Sun slightly refined it, and it became a type of great Tao comprehension. It was like he had obtained the great Tao energy of the man in a red robe. Devouring the cultivation of others for my own use? Even Lin Sun himself was slightly surprised. Is this the true might of the star-engulfing vault? This is extremely unbelievable, and it can simply be called heaven-defying. After all, the cultivation of the great Tao was extremely difficult. A cultivator comprehended the creation of the heavens and the earth in their entire lifetime before comprehending the profundities of the great Tao. Now, Lin Sun only had to devour it, and it would be within his reach. Once such an ability was discovered by others, it would surely cause the heavens to tremble. But Lin Sun was slightly disappointed after sizing it up slightly. The energy of the great Tao that the man in a red robe possessed could simply be considered as a great fortune to others, and it was sufficient to allow any figure of the Saint Tao to undergo a transformation. But it was useless to Lin Sun. The reason was extremely simple. In terms of seeking the great Tao, his path of cultivation and the energy of the great Tao he grasped far surpassed the man in a red robe. The only thing that Lin Sun felt he gained was that the energy of the great Tao contained the man's understanding and comprehension towards the Tao domain. All of this could be used as a reference for Lin Sun. Simply speaking, he could use the knowledge of others to improve himself, and from there, he would be able to draw inferences about other things by analogy. Even though it isn't of great use, it can be condensed into the comprehension of the great Tao. It can be used even if I give it away or sell it. While Lin Sun was thinking, the scene was already filled with horror. The man in a red robe was a peerless saint king like the wind and snow, but under the suppression of Lin Sun's Dao domain, he was unable to put up any resistance and was turned into ashes. This scene caused those big shots to be scared out of their wits, and they all chose to flee. Even the peerless saint king, like the woman in a luxurious robe, chose to flee at this moment. They were completely scared out of their wits. Originally, they suspected Lin Sun's identity and, driven by their inner greed, wanted to intercept this great fortune. But who would have thought that Lin Sun was no longer a peerless great saint? His combat strength was so powerful that he could even kill a peerless saint king who had been famous for a long time. How could they fight him? But how could Lin Sun allow them to escape under his nose? Confrontation. Lin Sun took a deep breath and activated the embryonic Dao domain with all his might. The aura of chaos filled the air, like a sky curtain, and suddenly covered everything. The 4 poles of the sky and the 8 corners of the earth seemed to be sealed. In an instant, several saint kings were trapped, and the Dao domain was still spreading at an astonishing speed. Every trapped saint king was like a tiny insect that fell into the abyss. Their bodies seemed to be completely imprisoned, and they were unable to struggle at all. Even if they tried their best, it was useless. They were instantly wiped out and turned into ashes. The power of the Great Way in their bodies was deprived and devoured, and poured into Lin Sun's body. Lin Sun did not care about this at all. His eyes were fixed on the woman in a luxurious robe, who was at the peerless Saint King realm in the furthest distance. This woman moved through the void at an astonishing speed. But Lin Sun was not anxious at all. He gently raised his hand and pointed at the void. This finger disappeared, and in the next moment, it appeared out of thin air behind the woman in a luxurious robe, suppressing down. Boundless. No matter where you fled to, you would be instantly killed by this finger. After Lin Sun stepped into the peerless Saint King realm, the power and magical power contained in this finger became more and more terrifying. Bang! The figure of the woman in a luxurious robe staggered between heaven and earth and fell out of the void. Her face was filled with disbelief. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun appeared out of thin air with an indifferent expression. "It's better for me to personally send you on your way." Rumble. The Dao domain, which was like chaos, enveloped her. "No!" The woman in a luxurious robe screamed, her pretty face filled with horror. But her voice soon stopped. As the Dao domain operated, this elegant and graceful peerless Saint King also followed in the footsteps of the red-robed man. Her power of the Great Way was deprived and devoured, and she was turned into ashes. Chapter 1903. After killing the woman in a splendid robe, Lin Sun's body was surging with all kinds of chaotic insights. Lin Sun ran his cultivation to suppress them one by one, but he didn't refine them immediately. Some of them were useful and some were useless. It took time to identify them. He looked in another direction. There Li Pu, an elder of Star Sword Pavilion in a green robe, stopped. He had fled in panic before, but at this moment, he stayed there abnormally. Even his expression did not show any signs of panic. "It seems that you have another plan." Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep, but he didn't take action immediately. Li Pu smiled and said, "Unlike them, I'm sure that you are Lin Sun." "How can you be sure?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Li Pu pointed at his own head. "Intuition tells me that there aren't many peerless figures in this world. Some of the famous ones have already shaken the ancient path of the starry sky. Only you, Lin Daoyuan, seem to have appeared out of thin air. With the battle strength you possessed when you were at the peak of the great saint realm, your name should have shaken the world long ago. However, no matter if it's me or anyone else, no one has ever heard of your name before. This is very unusual." Lin Sun said, "Go on." Li Pu looked very calm and said with a smile, "As far as I know, there is one person in this world who has the same identity as you. That is Lin Sun, who ranks first on the great saint list of starry sky. If you two are the same person, then many things are easy to understand. Lin Sun said, anything else? Li Pa smiled playfully, of course. Thank you for helping my Star Sword Pavilion eliminate a group of competitors. Now everyone knows that they died in your hands, and I am destined to be no match for you. So Lin Sun seemed to understand and said, so, if I die here, there will be no evidence, and you can get a good fortune from me. Even if you leave here alive, you don't have to worry about being suspected by others, right? Li Pa praised, my young friend has a sharp eye. Lin Sun was puzzled, but since you know you are no match for me, why speaking of this, Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed and he said, I see. As soon as his voice fell, whoosh, a figure silently appeared in the sky. He wore a Taoist robe and an iron crown on his head. He had 3 strands of willow whiskers on his chin, and he had a sage-like appearance. But the moment Lin Sun saw this person, he recognized that he was a quasi-emperor. Lin Sun had seen countless quasi-emperor realm figures back in the imperial pass of the ancient Desolation realm, so there was no way he would be mistaken. It's too late for you to understand. The man in the Taoist robe leisurely spoke. His figure casually stood there like a ruler, exuding a formless majesty. Greetings, martial uncle. Li Pa stepped forward and bowed. This person was precisely Li Pa's martial uncle, the stellar Jade Sword Pavilion's Grand Elder Chui Fu, an old monster at the Quasi-Emperor realm who had lived in seclusion for many years. No wonder you're so confident. You've already planned this out. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. In this way, has the news in the Du secret realm been sealed a long time ago? Li Pa was frank and said with a smile, young friend, your identity is special. Killing you is a small matter, but if others were to find out that the fortuitous encounter in your possession was obtained by our stellar Jade Sword Pavilion, then it would be a great calamity. Fortunately, my stellar Jade Sword Pavilion is the #1 orthodoxy in the Du world after all. Sealing some news is naturally not a problem. Haha, interesting. Lin Sun laughed as well. He hadn't expected that there were actually so many secrets hidden behind this slaughter. It can't be helped. A fortuitous encounter to become an emperor or ancestor is sufficient for any orthodoxy to fight for it at all costs. Li Pa sighed with emotion, and his eyes carried a wisp of fervor. Lin Sun restrained his smile, and his black eyes were deep as he said indifferently, however, are all of you really sure that a mere quasi-emperor can make me stay? Li Pa frowned, and then his brows relaxed as he teased, young friend, don't tell me that you can cross a realm to go against a quasi-emperor when you've just broken through. As he finished speaking, even he shook his head and laughed. Quasi-emperor. In the great U world, he was like a god, and even a peak saint king could only bow his head to him. Shameless boasting. The man in the Taoist robe, Chui Fu, also laughed, but his smile was full of mockery. He pushed out his palm. Boom. A palm print that blotted out the sky, wrapped in the obscure power of a quasi-emperor, shrouded over. It gave people the feeling that the mountains and rivers of this world had become insignificant in front of this palm. This was a quasi-emperor, like a god descending to the mortal world. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed slightly, and his cultivation suddenly revolved to the extreme. Above his head, the embryonic form of the Tao domain appeared, and a misty chaotic qi circulated. Bang! As this palm slammed down, the Tao domain shook violently, but in the end, the terrifying and boundless palm power was obliterated inch by inch. However, Lin Sun didn't feel good either, and the qi and blood all over his body surged. After all, his opponent was a quasi-emperor, and he was currently at the peak of the early stage of the Saint King realm. The difference in cultivation level was too great. But Lin Sun wasn't discouraged, and instead, his spirit was lifted. When he was at the Great Wall of the Imperial Pass, he had little power to resist in front of a quasi-emperor, who was regarded as a god in the sky, and he was as small as an ant. But now, he had the foundation to fight against a quasi-emperor. Chui Fu revealed a look of surprise. It's only in embryonic form, but it's already so wonderful. If you are given a period of time to perfect it, I'm afraid you can condense a superb Tao domain. Uncle, there's no need to talk nonsense with this boy. It's better to capture and kill him quickly. Li Po reminded him. Lin Sun was actually able to take a blow from Chui Fu, which made his heart quite uneasy, and his scalp tingled. He didn't dare to imagine how terrifying Lin Sun would become if he was allowed to grow up in the peak of the Saint King realm. But before Chui Fu could make another move, Lin Sun's figure had disappeared into thin air, and the next moment, he appeared in front of Chui Fu, waving his fist to attack. Boom! The embryonic power of the Tao domain condensed in the fist, reflecting a wonderful scene that was like a furnace but not a furnace, like an abyss but not an abyss. Chui Fu looked indifferent, and the divine power on his body roared. In an instant, he seemed to have turned into a lofty god and waved his hand. The two collided, the world trembled, and the unparalleled torrent of power swept in all directions like a volcanic eruption. Li Po, who was nearby, staggered and was almost thrown out. At the same time, Lin Sun's figure was also shaken back a few steps, and his qi and blood were tumbling. But his black eyes were shining, his qi and blood were boiling, and his fighting spirit was getting stronger. At his level, how could he be afraid of a quasi-emperor? Fight! His figure was glowing, and his momentum was like a divine rainbow piercing through the sun. He waved his fist and attacked with confidence and invincibility. Even if God was in front of him, he would first kill him fearlessly. Chui Fu frowned slightly. In the previous confrontation, if it was an ordinary Saint King, he would have been smashed to pieces by his slap, but Lin Sun only took a few steps back. This made him awestruck. What kind of profound cultivation could make a young man have such a heaven-defying fighting power at this level? Taking a deep breath, he no longer hesitated and stepped forward. Boom! As he stepped forward, the sky and earth shook, the mountains collapsed, and endless divine brilliance spread from his body. Suppress! He chanted, his palms and fingers formed a seal and knocked in the void. Lin Sun, who was rushing towards him, seemed to be blocked by a natural moat, and his body was shaken away with a bang. But as if nothing had happened, Chui Fu stretched his muscles and said, "Old man, there are not many quasi-emperors in this world who are as unbearable as you." In the mocking voice, Lin Sun took a deep breath and ran his strength to the extreme. His whole body turned into a big abyss, moving across the field and crushing the void in all directions. Chui Fu's old face was a little embarrassed after his attacks were repeatedly countered by Lin Sun. He snorted coldly and grabbed at the void. Boom! In the void, tens of thousands of thunderbolts suddenly fell, all as thick as a bucket, gorgeous and dazzling, and flowing with a terrible aura of destruction. The way of thunderbolts was the most murderous. Not to mention that it was a quasi-emperor attacking. For ordinary cultivators, this kind of power was no different from the tribulation thunder of heaven. In the blink of an eye, Lin Sun was struck away, his hair disheveled and his clothes torn, but he still sneered, "If I go down like this, I will make a fool of myself." Chui Fu's brows were suffused with ferocious killing intent. His figure flickered as he manipulated the laws of wind and thunder, triggering a heavenly phenomenon. Thunder rolled and lightning danced wildly. Rumble! For a time, the world was turbulent, and Lin Sun, like a lone boat caught in a storm, was suppressed to the point that he could not raise his head, and his figure staggered in an extremely embarrassing manner. But no matter how Chui Fu attacked, he was unable to kill him in a short time. Even the injuries on Lin Sun's body recovered again and again in the battle. It was as if he was immortal. The incomparably tenacious power made the corners of Chui Fu's eyes twitch, and the killing intent in his heart blazed even more. If such a little monster was alive, it would simply be endless trouble. Boom! With surging divine power, Chui Fu used his killing move. The vast mountains and rivers were all covered with thunder and lightning. The power released made Li Po, who was watching the battle in the distance, feel suffocated and almost scared out of his wits. But what made him even more horrified was that under such a killing move, even though Lin Sun was extremely embarrassed, he was still like a stubborn stone, enduring it. Where the hell did this pervert come from? Li Po was dumbfounded and cursed. Old guy, can you do it or not? Lin Sun coughed up blood again, and his face was pale. But his black eyes were as bright as stars, and his fighting intent soared to the sky. A quasi-emperor? It seemed that he was just SOSO, little bastard. The blue veins on Chui Fu's forehead bulged. Being despised by a junior like this again and again made him angry. Boom. Chui Fu hugged the void with both hands. Behind him, an amazing Dharma idol emerged, like a divine lord of the Tao. The sun and the moon rose and fell, and the stars revolved. It was solemn, and its body was surging with endless light. The day of the divine challenge. Chui Fu shouted like thunder in spring. And behind him, the Dharma idol, like a divine lord, suddenly waved its fist, setting off endless light and smashed towards Lin Sun. Lin Sun's pupils suddenly shrank. This was the first time that he felt an extreme sense of danger since the battle began, like a knife piercing to the bone. Chapter 1904. This was the real power of the quasi-emperor realm. This was the real power of the quasi-emperor realm. When the fist force burst out, the world was spinning and the sound of Tao was like thunder, as if the sun in the sky was smashed by this punch. Lin Sun's body was stiff. Under the stimulation of a strong sense of crisis, he did not hesitate to use his trump card. Whoosh! Obscure, blazing light burst forth from his origin's spirit meridians. For a moment the world seemed to be still and time was frozen. Chui Fu's punch also strangely stagnated like a frozen picture. The power of the origin, forbidden death. Almost at the same time, Lin's figure disappeared out of thin air. The next moment, he appeared in front of Chui Fu, with a bottle of infinite wei in his palm, aiming at Chui Fu's head. Buzz! A ray of sword qi swept out. Its sharpness was unparalleled, unrestrained, and contained all kinds of mysteries. The unique skill of War Emperor Wuyong. There was no return. When Chui Fu woke up from the state of forbidden death, his vision was filled with brilliant sword light. Not good. His pupils suddenly shrank. At this critical moment there was no time to dodge, so he could only face it head-on. Boom! In the deafening collision sound, Chui Fu's figure was drowned by the endless sword qi, and he was fiercely slashed out. His shrill screams also rang out, startling the surroundings. Uncle! In the distance, Li Po turned pale with fright, and his soul almost left his body. How could something like this happen so suddenly? Before, he was completely unprepared. It was too sudden. With Li Po's current cultivation realm, it was impossible for him to know how terrifying and taboo an ability like the Death Seal was. It involved the usage of the supreme laws of time, and even martial emperors would be unable to comprehend it in their entire lives. Not to mention that Li Po was just a king of saints. But to Lin Sun's surprise, Chui Fu survived such a blow. In the pervading sword qi, Chui Fu's figure was ragged, his hair was disheveled, and his muscles were torn by mottled sword marks, dripping with blood. Especially on his chest, there was a gap, which was deep to the bone, and his internal organs were seriously injured. But even so, he still survived. Was this the strength of a quasi-emperor? Lin Sun's heart was very restless. In this attack, he used the forbidden death theurgy as the seal, and used almost half of the power in his body. Then, with the great wei immeasurable bottle as the guide, he released the move, no return. That kind of power was enough to easily kill any peak saint king in the world. However, when he was dealing with a quasi-emperor, he only managed to injure him severely. This made Lin Sun immediately realize that he had underestimated the terror of a quasi-emperor. Quasi-emperor! He was above all the saints and was infinitely close to the imperial realm. The power of the great path that he controlled was also close to the imperial realm rules. He was indeed not something that the saints could compare to. Little bastard, I'll make you wish you were dead. Amidst a furious and resentful howl, Chui Fu charged over explosively. His expression was savage, and he was completely enraged. He was like a bloodthirsty devil that emanated a peerlessly violent aura. He was a quasi-emperor. When had he ever suffered such a serious injury? Moreover, it was a sneak attack by a junior. This was simply an extraordinary humiliation. Whoosh! Lin soon dodged without hesitation, his figure disappearing from where he was. At this moment, Chui Fu had completely lost his composure and was in a state of violent rage. Even though he was seriously injured, if he fought desperately, the consequences would be unimaginable. Boom! The earth cracked, the void was in disorder, and the place where Lin Sun had been standing was forcibly blasted into a huge ravine. The aura of destruction was flowing. Escape? Impossible! Chui Fu roared, his voice shaking the sky. His hair was disheveled as he moved through the void to pursue Lin Sun. In just a moment, Lin Sun's situation became precarious. Under the cover of the power of a quasi-emperor, when he moved and dodged, it was as if he was caught in a storm, and the pressure was astonishing. Kill him, you must kill him! In the distance, Lipa clenched his fists. The combat strength and potential that Lin Sun had shown were too terrifying. He could actually seriously injure a quasi-emperor. This made him feel an indescribable chill. Once such a monster escaped alive, failure would become a great threat. Boom! Along with the roar, when Lin Sun dodged, he was swept by the rolling thunder. The bones and flesh of his shoulder were broken and charred. He coughed up blood, but his expression was still calm. A quasi-emperor? It was really nothing. Lin Sun had experienced countless bloody killings in his life, and was accustomed to the ordeal of life and death. The current predicament could not affect his mood at all. Die! With a roar that shook the sky, the crazy Chui Fu rushed at Lin Sun, ferocious and violent, murderous. Wherever his big hand shrouded, the thunder was like a mountain and the lightning was like a waterfall. Chui Fu was determined to win this blow. He seemed to be furious, but in fact, he knew very well that if he didn't kill Lin Sun quickly, once he couldn't hold on, he would completely miss the opportunity to become an emperor and ancestor. This was absolutely intolerable to him. At the same time, Lin Sun's figure stopped in the air and once again displayed the forbidden passing. A familiar scene appeared. The world seemed to fall into absolute stillness. Lin Sun rushed forward and fiercely inserted the broken sword into Chui Fu's neck. Puff! Blood splashed everywhere. Chui Fu's neck and head were smashed in an instant. Lin Sun exerted all his strength in this attack. Chui Fu's neck and head were smashed in an instant. His headless body was attacked by the sharp edge of the broken sword, exploding inch by inch like a waterfall rain. It had to be said that the existence of the quasi-emperor realm was amazingly powerful. After suffering such a blow, a wisp of Chui Fu's remnant soul struggled out. With a look of horror on his face, he seemed to realize something. This turned out to be, boom! Before he finished speaking, the wisp of Chui Fu's remnant soul was also covered by Lin Sun's Tao field and abruptly obliterated. A generation of quasi-emperor, the supreme elder of the Star and Jade Sword Pavilion, Chui Fu, was dead. The bloody scene, with a shocking impact, made Li Per in the distance completely sluggish and lost his wits, murmuring involuntarily, "How could he be killed? Uncle is a quasi-emperor. No, this can't be true." Between heaven and earth, smoke and dust filled the air, and the smell of blood assailed the nostrils. A quasi-emperor had fallen, and his blood and breath had turned the area within a radius of 3,000 miles into a bloody wasteland, without any vitality. The biting cold wind whistled like a knife, whimpering and sobbing. At this time, if a cultivator came, he would be shocked by the scene in front of him, trembling with fear. With a thud, Lin Sun fell to the ground from the void. He was gasping for breath, his face pale and transparent, his clothes torn, his lips stained with blood, and his breath was extremely weak. Although the forbidden passing was against the natural order, every time he used it, it would consume half of his strength, as if burning his own origin. Now that he had used it twice, Lin Sun's strength had been completely drained, and his body fell into an extremely weak state. Quasi-Emperor, that's all. Compared with the weakness of his body, there was a surge of emotions fermenting in Lin Sun's heart. 3 days ago, he broke through the realm and reached the peak of the Holy King realm. Today, 3 days later, he killed a group of kings, killed the same realm, and killed a quasi-emperor. This was the combat power he had now. When he fought to the extreme, he could kill a quasi-emperor. Lin Sun, I'm going to kill you and avenge Uncle. In the distance, Lipa rushed over with a cold look, red pupils, and a livid face. Lin Sun said, You respect your master, but I'm afraid your purpose is not revenge, but to grab the opportunity. Li Po's eyes flashed with cold light. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone, why not? He approached step by step, urging his breath to the extreme. After all, he was a holy king in the perfection realm, so he had a powerful momentum. However, at this moment, in the face of Lin Sun, who was already extremely weak, Li Po looked particularly vigilant and careful, as if facing a formidable enemy. Before, all the kings from the 9 worlds were slaughtered by Lin Sun, and even the quasi-emperor Cui Fu died. Such a record was enough to make anyone in the world tremble. As a witness of all this, Li Po's mind had long been shocked, and the seeds of fear and dread had been sown in his heart. Therefore, even if he was sure that Lin Sun was almost exhausted, he didn't dare to have the slightest neglect and carelessness. Lin Sun sat on the ground, watching Li Po coming step by step, and couldn't help but show a mocking smile, saying, Old geezer, do you think you'll be able to block me if I go all out against you? The corner of Li Po's eyes twitched, and his footsteps also stopped. Then he said in a cold voice, You're about to die, and you still want to scare me. Swish. He suddenly waved his sleeves, took out a bright Taoist sword, and cut at Lin Sun in the distance. This distance was the most suitable for him to attack. Even if Lin Sun risked his life, he was sure that he could dodge in time. If Lin Sun couldn't stop this sword, it would undoubtedly be the best result. Unfortunately, Lin Sun didn't move from beginning to end. He just watched quietly, and the mockery on his face became more and more intense. It was as if he was looking at a pitiful worm who didn't know life from death. This made Li Po very uncomfortable and angry, but the next moment, he was stunned. The Taoist sword he had cut out was pinched by a big hand out of thin air, as casually as pinching a leaf. Crack! Crack! With a crisp sound of breaking, the precious Taoist sword was crushed by the big hand like a piece of paper, turning into a rain of light and falling through the fingers. This, Li Po's pupils dilated as if he was struck by lightning. He didn't know when, but there was an illusory old man in a Taoist robe in the field. With just a glance, Li Po only felt that his Taoist heart was almost broken, producing a great terror. His body fell into an ice cave and was about to suffocate. Who are you? How dare you stop my Star Sword Pavilion from killing the enemy? Li Po stammered, and his mind went blank. People call me Green Sun Saber Emperor. The old man in Taoist robe looked indifferent and glanced at him. Li Po collapsed at once. Green Sun Saber Emperor. This was a legendary figure who had long been famous in the starry sky. In the entire Ziheng star area, he was second to none in the Emperor realm. However, Li Po couldn't figure out why Green Sun Saber Emperor, who had disappeared for countless years, would appear here. Suddenly, Li Po's heart moved. He respectfully bowed and said, Senior, are you also here for the good fortune of this boy? In this case, I dare not have the intention to touch it anymore. I'll leave now.